Welcome back to the LoCo Experience podcast. My guest today is longtime LoCo Think Tank member and Doctor of Chiropractic, Jane Brewer,
Hello,
with
Kurt.
Precision Chiropractic. And I love how you look with your blue teal hat with the blue teal light in the
I
background.
do expect color coordinated lighting on all of my podcasts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you said this is one of your first non-Zoom podcasts.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of
So-
the interviews I've done have been through a screen, so this is different.
Well, and they're probably looking for like your smart girl stuff in chiropractic, and particularly, what is the thing that you're the expert on?
This is a mouthful. I have a credential. It's a DCCJP, so it stands for Diplomate in Chiropractic Craniocervical Junction Procedures. It just means I'm a head and neck specialist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and the atlas.
Correct.
Right.
That
That's the
uppermost vertebra in the spine.
juncture.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was
Exactly.
trying to remember it.
Good job.
and then I did.
Yes.
But not really.
You had it, yeah.
So you're one of like really small number of people with that designation, like a few hundreds or
I'm not
thousands,
even. I think
maybe.
there. Excuse me. There's been about 60 of us that have completed
Okay.
the program. The fourth cohort is going through now, so we'll add
Oh,
to the
wow.
ranks here when they make it successfully through the program.
Oh wow! And are you out for 2 years or something?
Yes, finished up in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dang. that
I
is
remember sitting
exclusive
down with
company.
you
Yeah,
near
yeah.
my office when you took me through all the steps of trying to make the decision of joining that program. That was before I was a member.
Oh, is that right? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad that was impactful. I remember that conversation. I didn't remember how impactful it might have been. It was the right decision for you.
It was. It was. And in different ways than I may have anticipated in the beginning, but
All right. So, I guess let's just introduce your business to the world here in another fashion than all
Okay.
the years, whatever you've done before. But what is Precision Chiropractic all about?
we are a chiropractic clinic, and we provide really specialized chiropractic services that really care for folks with head and neck issues. For example, we
Okay.
take care of a lot of people with migraines, headaches,
Okay.
different vertigo conditions, a lot of folks recovering from concussion, traumatic brain injury, jaw issues, ear issues, because of how closely related it is to the head and the
So
neck.
kind of especially for you, compared to a lot of chiropractors have a reputation as being like a backcracker.
Sure.
Right? But you're really more of a cranial specialist, anything in that area, the top of the neck, and it's messing your stuff up.
Yeah, that's my bread and butter. And of course, the neck's connected on down.
You can do the backcracking if you need to, or whatever is useful.
Any adjusting that we do in my practice, it doesn't involve much forceful
cracking.
twisting, popping, cracking. That's a very traditional chiropractic
Okay.
method of practice, and there's other ways. And what we do, especially with the upper neck, because it is a very delicate area, and
Right.
in my opinion, it requires a very dedicated and careful approach to managing and caring for it, especially in those more complex cases with people who have had injuries.
Yeah.
It's a very calculated adjustment. It's very gentle. It is designed for the individual based on very precise measurements that we've taken from imaging. And it's an instrument guided adjustment.
Oh. With your hands, or you mean the instrument actually?
So there's
what's
the instrument that actually delivers the force because
Okay.
it's exactly reproducible every
yeah.
time.
Is it a little plunger thingy? One of those
It's kind of
I'm
an
shocked. I haven't been to
evolution.
I haven't been through your chair.
I know. Well, I'm gonna be moving here in the springtime,
Yes,
so you
I
have to
know.
come see our new office.
I will. I'll pay for an appointment once you get
Okay.
settled into your new space.
Well, first step, consultation.
Okay.
And that's always complimentary.
Okay. Perfect.
But yeah, I mean, I take care of all chiropractic cases, and I would say the most common reason, of course, people think to visit a chiropractor is they have some kind of neck or back pain. That's, I think, what
sure.
chiropractic is known for.
Sure.
But with what I do, I really look, and it's a little different, but we really look at the upper neck as the structural foundation. And we're not used to thinking about the foundation of something at the top. We don't build a house from the ceiling down.
Yeah.
But what I try to do in an initial consultation with the folks that come see me is just teach them why, from a structural and a neurological perspective, that if this is going to sound silly, but if your head's not on straight,
Right.
if your head's not sitting over top of the rest of your spine, everything else is going to pay the price for it, both from a structural standpoint, leading to all kinds of postural compensations and aches and pains elsewhere. But from a neurological standpoint, that's about as close to the brain, the source of all those
Yeah,
signals as you
yeah.
can get. And so if you've got an obstruction there, it's going to create problems downstream as well.
I've got. And I'm shocked that I haven't booked. I used to go to chiropractic once in a while when I was banking, and
Yeah.
me and Jill
Sitting.
both had income and discretionary and a lot more
Gotcha.
sitting
Yeah.
stuff. And then I was food trucking and completely broke. And then early stage LoCo Think Tank, still completely broke.
Yeah.
Still not wealthy, but I could get a couple of adjustments if I wanted to. But
sure.
I've got like a straight neck.
Yeah.
Like probably you've seen that a lot of times. And
Absolutely.
I still do some of the exercises that a chiropractor from 18 years ago told me I could do to try to help
Yeah.
progress.
For sure. And that curve in the neck is really important. We develop
Right.
that in infancy. That's why tummy time is so important for babies. When babies start to
Right.
pick their head
right.
up and tilt their head up, that's when that curve develops.
Well, I
and
assume my brain is heavier than most people's too.
you got a big noggin.
Well, I was thinking I'm extra smart.
Oh.
Big brain, heavy head.
Just big melon.
So, and what's your team? You're the only doctor?
I am
at
the only
Precision?
doctor currently.
Okay.
And we've always been a two-person team. I've always had one right-hand woman. So
Okay.
for 10 years, I've employed just 3 incredible people who have become really close friends.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
feel like that's really special, too, to
For
create
sure.
that opportunity for somebody else. So we've always been a two-person team. As I move into this new office that I keep mentioning,
Yeah.
I will hire a second clinical assistant because it'll help free me up to do some of the things that only I could do.
But still, probably you'll stay the only doctor. You have interest in.
I do, and I think there's a couple motivations behind me wanting to bring in an associate doctor. First is, of course, for them.
You could take a vacation without your clients missing you.
Yeah, that's a big deal on my end.
I'm sure.
That time
yeah,
freedom
for
it's,
lifestyle.
It's when I choose to leave, it's a very intentional choice because
Yeah.
again, two sides to that coin too. My patients aren't getting the care that they need,
They
and
don't pay
I have
you
no
anything.
income.
Yeah.
And by going back to maybe hiring another doctor, I've applied with 2 of the chiropractic colleges. As far as I know, all of the chiropractic schools require you do some kind of externship
Yeah.
or clinical experience before you
Kinda
graduate.
Try before you buy that way.
Exactly. So with the school that I went to and another school that's located in South Carolina, I've applied now to host interns. And so I think the next time I do go down that path, they will have to spend at least, a quarter in my office.
Yeah.
Not on my dime,
Right.
but also to see if we're a good match for each other.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they want that too.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, most chiropractors eventually want to have their own practice.
I
I
don't know.
think, or maybe not.
I
Maybe it used to be that way, 20 years ago or something, but maybe it's not as much. I don't know.
I'm not sure either. And there's a few options.
But either way, they can't do it right out of school. It was what I was going to say. Like, they're just not smart enough.
I know.
yet
Well, I
about-
did that, Kurt.
I know, but you're an unusual person. Plus, you were
I was
you were
older.
older than average,
Yeah.
so you already had life
Yeah.
interaction skills and stuff. You're
Totally.
not like, excuse me, sir, can I be your chiropractor? you know,
In the line at the grocery store, excuse me.
exactly.
Yeah.
So tell me about this new. You're buying a building. You're buying a space within a
Yeah,
building, a condo
so-
space. Where is it at?
After 10 years of paying somebody else's mortgage, and I'm going to be paying my own.
Yay.
So I feel really proud about that.
Well, you should feel proud about that.
And we're going to be moving in the springtime. I've got an awesome contractor, actually, this connection pathway through LoCo, which
Okay,
is
great.
pretty cool.
Awesome.
And
You can say their name if you.
so through
Want to.
Moses Horner, our chapter facilitator, he
Yeah.
introduced me to Josh Mathis, who owns
Okay.
Projects Limited. So he's
Okay,
going to
cool.
be doing my tenant finish.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, but
Yeah,
that's great.
super good guy, and
Yeah.
it's been awesome working with him so far.
Great.
But I'll be moving in the springtime. Our new office is going to be just a straight shot 5 miles north. So currently I'm near Shields in Centera.
Right, like by the bonefish and whatnot.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so if you drive 5 miles north on County Road 5, so past Crossroads and where like the ranch is,
Okay.
Fuzzies,
Yeah.
and you keep going north before you hit 392 at
Yeah,
the
right
Windsor
before.
exit,
Like by the
where the
Better
ice
Business
rink is.
Bureau there
Exactly.
and
So it's in
stuff?
the business. It's in
Oh, I
the
love that
building
business park.
just north of the Better Business.
Oh, is that right?
Bureau building.
Okay.
The
Yep.
BBB.
Yeah, I'm there all the time.
Yeah. So you'll have to come say hi.
You could lobby Moses to move your chapter right there.
Okay.
But that might be kind of awkward. You're like, I just have to go across the hall.
No, I like coming up to Old Town Fort
Yeah, for
Collins.
sure. Gives
Yeah,
you a
I live
reason.
in Fort Collins. I love to come up here.
Cool. But you would have room in this new space if you wanted to add
Yeah.
you mentioned that another clinical associate would be first.
Yes. So my next hire is going to be another clinical assistant,
Assistant, rather.
as far as somebody that's going to help chart for me, help direct the flow of patient traffic in the office, and just free my time up to actually just focus on caring for people
Yeah,
and
yeah.
do the clinical things that only I'm licensed to do.
Sure.
And so I'll have one more administrative focused assistant and one more clinical focused assistant. They'll be
Gotcha.
cross trained, so one of them can take a
Yep.
vacation or have a few days
Right.
off.
Well, that's important for just quality of life and
Absolutely.
stuff too. You know.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things is, like with LoCo Think Tank, we don't really have to make the sausage, right? The machine kind of
Yeah.
runs, and so Alma had come back from a little trip, and then she's trying to plan a trip next November to Japan.
Oh my gosh, awesome.
And then they're going with like a group of 8 or something, but all these other people are like, I don't know if I can get enough hours, and my boss isn't
Right.
going to be cool with me being gone for 10 days in a row, and this and that. And I'm like, you see, yeah, like LoCo Think Tank is cool that way.
Yeah.
It's like I'm like proud that she's sacrificing some
Totally.
lifestyle to take a trip to Japan.
Yeah, a couple
At-
years
at a young
ago,
age.
I decided to effectively salary, I guess, my office manager because I do take a lot of time off. A few years ago, I was taking time off to travel for my double mate program,
Education stuff.
and I speak at a lot of conferences, and
Right.
every so often we take a personal vacation, and it just never felt right to me to have an employee that would suffer my insane
Right.
schedule and be like, sorry about your paycheck. I'm going to be out of town this week. And so
Yeah.
my office manager now gets steady hours, same paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
No matter whether,
And
there's some
sometimes
weeks
you're
we
super
put
busy
in.
and you bust the butt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And some weeks we have a lot more time off. And so it's just nice to
Yeah, yeah.
not have me worry about it and not have them worry about it.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's cool. That's smart. So sometime this spring, April, May, something like
Yep,
that.
just depending on how things flow. I think
Okay.
actually in 2 weeks we scheduled a date where I'm gonna go in there and I'll put on a hard hat and some glasses and we're gonna smash some walls and windows
Awesome.
and just demo and get ready to actually build it out. I worked with a firm in Atlanta that helps design floor plans for chiropractic practices. So I've learned a lot from being in my space for 10 years about
Yeah.
how things should flow in the office and where things should be located and kind of the journey of the patient from when they walk through the door and they stop at the front desk and this is where a new patient goes, this is where an
Yeah.
established patient goes.
Yeah.
So it's laid out in a much smarter way.
Yeah, perfect. Talk to people, and what was your chiropractic school, by the way?
I went to Life University outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
Yep.
And then they're affiliated, or not at all, with the South Carolina one that you could also
Nope.
take people from?
Independent.
Just similarly, like their style, like their values,
I
whatever,
do.
that
Like
kind of thing.
they are more philosophically based chiropractic. You'll find there's chiropractors of many different flavors, I guess.
Right.
And honestly, some of the schools, their focus isn't even a whole lot of adjusting, which is mind-boggling to me because that is the one unique skill that as
yeah.
chiropractors we offer to people. And even underneath that umbrella, there are many different ways to adjust the spine. But if
Right.
you're not doing that, you're
Well,
not doing the one thing that we're uniquely trained to
Well,
do.
it's like measuring and adjusting.
Yeah.
Because if you're just adjusting without having measured first, kind of you're like, well, I
Correct.
don't know where we started, I don't know where we're going.
That's exactly right.
We'll just do some cracky and get you on a
Hope for the best,
once
right?
every 2 week schedule.
Yeah, we do a lot of objective outcome measuring
Yeah,
in
cool.
my office, a lot of pre and post testing because, I mean, if anything else, if nothing else, I want to know that I'm
Right.
influencing the change that
For
I set out to
sure,
make.
for
Of
sure.
course, that's important to the people that
Yeah,
I'm
when
taking
somebody's
care
like,
of too.
pain levels are, after 3 months, the pain levels are down 75%.
Right.
And
created
range of
that?
motion is,
Yeah.
this much more, that kind of thing.
Totally.
So talk to people that are chiropractic skeptics. Maybe that comes from your own journey or
Sure.
what you've seen since becoming a chiropractor, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people like I'm just kind of poor, a little bit poor, mostly cheap, so I've taught myself how to try to do yoga and stretches and different
Sure.
things
And
to be
that's
more
usually great at addressing.
self-care. I don't really have
Totally.
I don't have migraines, I don't have neck pain.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord,
Yes. So I'm going to start out by saying I think the spine is a really strange blind spot when it comes to healthcare.
Okay.
And I don't think it's managed very well. It's like we all think to get our
It's
teeth
like our wiring harness,
cleaned,
basically.
and we all get our eyes checked. We get our hearing checked. We have blood work done. The spine is a huge blind spot in that system. And like you just mentioned, it protects the most important thing we have, without which everything else would actually cease to function correctly.
Right.
And so, and these are concepts that I learned, I would say in my early 30s. Like you mentioned before, I was older when I went to school. I started chiro school when I was 32 years old. I had an art degree. And so I didn't really have even a whole lot of science experience. I just had a personal life-changing experience with my own care,
Okay.
which inspired me to go to school. I just saw that at its purest place,
Yeah.
chiropractic just makes sense.
Right.
That the spine houses the central nerve system. I tell my patients, think about it like the electrical wiring system in your body.
Yeah.
And you've got the source up in the brain, and those nerve pathways, it's kind of like driving on I-25 every day. We
Yeah.
got 3 lanes
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
When all three lanes of traffic are moving, life is good. We get from point A to point B efficiently. We arrive at our destination, life is good, right?
Yeah.
But if there's an obstruction there, if there's an obstruction in one lane, two lanes, if there's an accident, if, it's snowed and they haven't plowed, and there's an obstruction there, it's going to take you longer. It's going to be more dangerous. The conditions aren't as ideal. It's a really similar concept. If the brain isn't able to communicate over those neural pathways,
Yeah.
then some kind of function, and those nerves control everything, every movement we make, everything we sense and feel, how we connect with the world outside of ourselves, and
Yeah.
how everything internally is regulated. And if there's an obstruction in those neural pathways, something is going to result in a loss of function there.
Do chiropractors make a difference? People with autoimmune disorders sometimes?
Certainly. When you think, first of all, you've got the whole gut-brain axis,
Right.
And so the brain has a huge neural network, not only in the spine, but throughout the entire body. And, autoimmunity is just a failure of the body to recognize what is
things
innate.
aren't actually bad.
Exactly. And what is a foreign invader, right?
Yeah, right.
And so it's not that we treat those things directly. I'm not an
You don't advertise
immunologist, I'm
that.
not a cardiologist, but we do work with this underlying neural network that coordinates the function of all of those things. And I will tell you, in the 10 years I've been doing this, I have seen people's Crohn's disease or, other autoimmune conditions improve, objectively. They'll go to their medical doctor and their blood work has changed. And it's like, cool, your body's regulating itself a bit better.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, cool. I don't know if I've talked to you about it. Probably not, but I've had...
I saw you had a hitch in your giddy up.
Yeah, which I believe is psoriatic arthritis.
Yeah.
I've had psoriasis a couple times in the last few years, like on the skin.
Yes.
Even now in my elbow, there's a little psoriasis thing, right?
Yeah.
But I believe that in this case, in last November, it's been causing me swelling.
Some
in my
joint issues,
Yeah, and there's like a little surface almost over my kneecap. There's a little popping and clicking that shouldn't be there.
Me too, but for different reasons.
Well, yeah, mine's not skiing related or anything, I don't think. But it's because, something in my body is kind of telling this area to do some
Correct.
stuff that it shouldn't want to be doing.
Or maybe it's not managing inflammation as optimally as it
Right,
should.
exactly
that type
that,
of thing.
yeah.
And it's true, we're not taught to think about our bodies in this way. Nobody thinks, oh, my knee's feeling a little inflamed, I should go have my neck checked.
Right. Well, I should probably go to get some acupuncture. Would be
All of that.
as useful.
All of that works with those natural,
Just getting things
innate
flowing,
capacity of our
lubed up.
body, exactly, to heal itself. Because truly, that's how it all happens. We heal ourselves.
It's better if it's that way. Otherwise, you just kind of get hooked on steroid shots every 9 months.
And
or
truly,
whatever.
that's not healing. That's more of a patch than a fix.
Yeah.
It gets you out of the woods, and don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for everything. But I think a lot of the folks that come see me, and every so often I even have somebody that walks through my door, they're like, I feel great, and I just want to keep it that way. It's like, awesome.
Yeah.
I had a mentor, actually, the doctor that started Life University in Marietta, Georgia, Dr. Sid Williams. He was just huge personality. He got this big booming Southern voice, and I actually had the privilege of knowing Dr. Sid, and he passed away while I was actually in chiropractic school. It's okay, but he would say these things, and some of them would just stick with you, and he'd be like, "You either pay now or you pay later."
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a truth to that.
100%,
And it's hard to measure, or impossible to measure, what might not happen later on down the road because you had the opportunity to take care of yourself now.
Yeah,
so it is in that way a little bit abstract,
well,
right?
it can be chiropractic. It can be, just spending that 30 minutes a day exercising.
For sure,
in
it could be
some
drinking one
capacity.
extra glass of water every day.
Totally.
Like, it doesn't have to be anything
One less glass of
complicated or
tequila.
expensive. I thought that was water.
Oh, no, yours is tequila too. Just kidding. So I guess, and I want to get into your particular story and
Sure.
get the deets on that, but like since you've been practicing, do you have the authority to share like some real dramatic stories where, you were the main thing that caused somebody really dramatic changes?
Yes, and I always want to make
They
sure
all come with
people...
an asterisk.
No, I want to make sure people understand that I'm just the facilitator in that process.
Right.
I know what to do and when to do it to restore their body's inborn
Flow.
recuperative abilities, right?
Yeah,
And so if I take credit for all the good stuff, I've got to take credit for the ones that didn't work too. And I
Fair.
do, but the thing is, everybody's different. So to answer your question, that was my little asterisk at the beginning,
Yeah.
my little caveat.
It's
Like,
not a magic bullet always in some
well, and
situations.
what people do the 99.9% of the time they're outside of my office also has a huge impact on how their
Right.
bodies function
If they're
too.
eating 2 bags of Doritos every night on the couch,
Right.
It isn't going to matter
I
how
know.
many adjustments they get every month.
I think chiropractors are never as nerdy as when we're in school, like, and we're students, and we're just on Chiropractic Island and
You're
surrounded by people who
idealized that-
really think the same way.
Right.
But, we would eat our salad at lunch and be like, this broccoli is going to become my eye tissue tomorrow. But yeah, that's those, I think from the outside looking in, they would be called these miracle cases, right? Those are the things that
Right.
keep me really fired up about what I do. And honestly, even the little things that get better, like the person that could check their blind spot easier because
Yeah.
they could turn their head better,
Yeah.
like that lights me up too. But man, through the years, like I've seen folks go into remission from MS. Like
Okay.
they've had post MRI scans and those lesions have gone away or reduced significantly.
Wow.
That's pretty
Along
stinking
with the
cool.
associated probably increase in just functionability and
Quality of life. And to me, that like that's really
walk
what it
across the yard, whatever.
boils down to is the quality of life
Yeah,
piece, right?
yeah.
So that was really cool. I also was caring for a mom who she did great. She had a lot of TMJ issues that cleared up really well. But I was talking to her. She was on my table one day, and she said, "Oh, my son, he was getting towards the end of high school, and he was a really talented baseball player. Like, was looking to get recruited by colleges." And she said, "Man, he's not doing well. He was in a massive collision in the outfield. Like, I think he had the impression of that other kid's braces like in his forehead, and he had a pretty serious concussion."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you need to bring him to me."
Right.
And so she did. The very next day, she brought the son in, and we did our imaging. And she's like, "He just hasn't been himself. He hasn't been sleeping. He's not at, even close to being able to function to go back to school." I mean, the kid was in a bad way.
Real serious concussion,
And
basically.
so did imaging. And what happens, I measure the imaging, I craft an adjustment. There's very
Okay.
specific angles and measurements that we create for
So
the
is this
individual.
inflammation within there that's holding it out of place on the spine or something?
Well,
or...
if you've hit your head hard enough to create a concussive force,
Yeah.
there's no way it didn't knock your neck out of alignment.
Right.
Too. Like,
So it's the spine is out of alignment, and it's like, what is it muscles that are supposed to keep it in alignment?
yeah, there's muscles, there's ligaments, but when it comes to concussion, there's a lot of factors there, and it's really cool. I read a lot of research, but there is a lot that connects with fluid dynamics.
Oh.
And so by that, I mean blood flow to and from the
Right.
brain. That blood flow brings oxygen, nutrients, creates healing.
As part of even like the balancing is kind of the
Yeah.
pressure, like having the tire pressure balance on
Yeah,
both sides. or
exactly. And we
whatever.
have cerebrospinal fluid.
Yeah.
And the more that we start to understand about the purpose of CSF, it's like the scrub brush for the neural tissues in our body. And so it basically washes
Yeah,
all
because
of
these
the
things are regenerating all the time.
right. It washes all of the the plaques and all of the metabolic waste products that can accumulate in those tissues. And by the way, those have been
Dead white blood cells and whatnot
now
else all.
been implicated in some neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. That's all abnormal protein deposits in the brain. And anyways, that CSF should flow and it should keep those tissues healthy.
So
but
back to the kid.
when you knock your neck out of alignment, it can almost like a cork in a bottle start to create a less than optimal flow. So anyways, going back to that kid, he was not doing well. Moral of the story is I got him adjusted. We have our patients. We have a stabilization room where patients get to rest in these zero gravity chairs. It's super comfy. It's really relaxing, but it also serves the purpose of stabilizing the adjustment. So we tucked him in for 10 or 15-minute rest after the adjustment, and he fell asleep for what the mom said was like the first time in, I think it was 3 or 4 days since he had his accident.
Wow.
And I was like, "Did we leave him in there for longer?" She's like, "Can we?" I'm like, "We can leave him in there as long as you need to." And
Yeah.
so after I was thinking about 45 minutes to an hour, we woke him up. I post-checked him. Everything looked great. I said, I told the mom, "I'm going to text you tomorrow morning and just check in with you and see how he's doing." And so I text the mom the next morning and she's like, "He woke up and he's himself." I saved that text message because, and I think we were talking before we started filming, but I'm not a crier. Like that's not how I express my emotions. But that one hit me right in the feels.
I bet.
Because what does that mean for the trajectory of this kid's life? Right.
Right.
And so he got back to it. She's like, "We now have to basically stop him from doing more than he should be doing right now.
Yeah.
And he went in, there's an incredible clinic in town called the Asha Brain Clinic.
Okay.
And they deal, of course, with a lot of folks that are healing from TBIs and concussion.
Okay.
And so I got a phone call from one of the providers over there, and they're like, "We need to know what you did to this kid." And I
Oh,
said,
because he had been in there before.
he went in for some testing after his injury,
Uh-huh.
and then he went in for another round of testing, and he tested not
Like
only
he's all fixed up.
normal for a teenager in his grade level, but better
Interesting.
when he had bombed all that testing prior. And
Interesting.
so that just opened up a really cool door to, and this ties into your question before about chiropractic skepticism. We
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
went off the rails with that.
No, that's okay.
But it's really cool to have those doors open. And I also credit some of my more advanced training to be able to have these conversations with other healthcare providers, MDs, neurologists, endocrinologists, to sit toe to toe with them and explain this is why physiologically these results are happening. This is how we accomplish that outcome. These are the steps that we took. It didn't ever involve me picking somebody's head up, twisting it, and hoping for the best. It was a very gentle, calculated, precise
Intentional.
correction.
Yeah.
And the goal isn't to see our patients twice a week for the rest of their lives. The goal is to get them as stable and as few adjustments as possible, and to teach them to recognize the signs when things aren't quite right so they
Yeah,
can come in and
yeah.
get tuned up. But yeah, that just went all over the place.
No, well, I think that it actually sets up my next question,
Okay.
which is, like, how old is your business now? 10?
It'll be 10 years this year
Okay.
in July.
So 10 years, not quite, 9.5 now, or
Yeah,
ish.
in business. I graduated 10 years ago, but
Okay.
opened my business July of 15.
So, like, talk to me about the process of finding, because if you're actually fixing people,
Right.
and you don't have a super visible location necessarily, like, you always got to find new people to keep
Sure.
your practice growing, I imagine. Or do you equip your customers to be really comfortable referring you, or what has been your mix of finding customers?
Yeah,
for your,
great.
for your
Initially,
practice?
I did a lot of networking
I
in the
remember
beginning.
I saw you at a lot of places.
Oh my gosh. I always think
I
about
never see you around networking
it's like
anymore.
Fight Club, right? And like they were going around to all these different meetings, right? I was like, it's like networking Fight Club. And you have to show face. And it's not that you are necessarily recruiting your
Yeah.
patients from these
Yeah.
things, but you want to be
Making
of
sure
course,
everybody
the
knows that you're
person they
open.
think about when their neighbor has a migraine or their friend gets into a motor vehicle accident or whatever it is. You want to be that top of mind
Yeah.
go-to place. And especially because I have this little niche within chiropractic. Like if somebody has a head or neck issue, there literally isn't anybody better in Northern Colorado. And it's weird to toot my own horn like that, but it's just the truth.
Yeah.
So now, like you said, things have evolved, right? After 10 years, you do establish more of a reputation. I get a ton of referrals from other healthcare
I was
providers.
going to ask, yeah.
So that's wonderful. And then, of course, with our patients, the results speak for themselves too. When they start feeling better and noticing these improvements
Sure.
in their day-to-day lives, they refer their spouse.
Right.
And
And they tell the story at work, and then 6 months
Yeah.
later, somebody at work is like, "Hey, Marcy, who was that chiropractor you saw?"
totally.
again?" You
And
know?
it's awesome, of course, for me and for my business, but it's awesome for them too, because now their coworker doesn't come in complaining every day, or they come home to their spouse. And, those are pieces of feedback that I've gotten too. Like kids have said to me, like, "Thank you for making my dad happier again." Like he comes home and he's excited to play with me on the floor, and it's
you're not gonna cry.
really cool.
Just kidding.
You can cry.
My goal is to try to make you cry here tonight.
It's not gonna work. I might. I don't know.
We'll see.
Let's see how this goes.
I can see how pointed my questions can get. Well, congratulations on approaching. When did you get out of school? Like,
I graduated from school December of 2014, so I
So you're
just
kinda
passed
right
the
there
10-year
now.
mark. Yeah, and it
Exactly.
took about 7 months. We landed. My husband Wes and I, we lived in Colorado for about 8 or 9 years before we moved to Atlanta. So I go to school, and we pretty much always knew Colorado would be where we returned to.
yeah.
But Front Range was totally new. We lived on the western slope, and we were ski bumming it. It was wonderful.
Talk
But,
to me more about the business of chiropractic, maybe.
yeah.
Like
That's-
we talked a little bit about acquiring clients. You didn't. You could, as a new business, you can spend all your money on marketing, and
Totally.
nobody even hears.
And I
what
want to
you
mention
say.
one thing before we move
Shoot.
on.
Yeah.
You were saying, like, of course, patients will have a natural life cycle, so
Yeah,
to speak.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, most of our patients, when we get to the end and we do a progress exam, we actually put everything up side by side. This is where we started. This is where we've ended up. And that kind of is the evidence, right? That
Right,
things
right.
have changed to support how they're feeling.
Yeah.
I would say the vast majority of our patients choose to come in usually about once a month to
Yeah,
just
that's
have
what I
their
was gonna
spine
say.
checked.
Yeah,
And,
just a little tune up,
exactly, just
which
make
is
sure it's peace of mind.
$100 these days.
Not even.
Not even.
Not even,
Okay.
Kurt.
All right.
Yeah, and I think it just makes sense. They've made the initial investment,
Yeah, yeah.
and they feel motivated to protect the gains they made, and also they feel good and they want to stay that way.
Well, I might even book a check-in appointment before your new location is open.
Okay.
But I'll come in for my actual work
I know.
in the new place.
Well, you should
'cause I
come
wanna
see my
it.
current office.
I
It was a
should.
good
I've
home
been
for
to
us
your,
for
I've been to
10.
your current office.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
2-3 times.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Mostly to drop off like Christmas gift or things
Thank
like that.
Sorry, you asked me a question.
Oh, businessy stuff, like the business of
Businessy stuff. I
chiropractic. Like
know.
we've talked about your small team, kind of,
Yes.
but like you're basically the revenue all flows through your fingers.
It
right?
does.
You doing the thing.
Yep. And from the beginning, I knew chiropractors, I mean, that title, our education, the reason we have that degree, we have become educated in being essentially doctors of the nervous system, and we access that through the spine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I see a tremendous value in that.
That's a great phrasing. I hadn't really heard it put quite like that.
Yeah.
But when you say it that specifically, yeah.
It's true.
Right. Well, I mean, a nutritionist is kind of a doctor of the food you eat.
Right.
Whatever. Like, there's all these specialties, and saying it in that fashion helps.
Totally.
I think people understand, maybe.
Yeah. And it makes sense to me that way.
Yeah.
But,
So, anyway.
well, I don't know. The business of chiropractic, I always knew, like, there's, I have a buddy. Can I say a bad word? It's
Sure.
not even a
Yeah,
bad word.
Yeah.
I have
yeah, you can.
Thank you. I grew up in New York City. That's like my first language.
no,
I
you
really
can-
have to try to filter
you can
things out
cuss, it's fine.
sometimes. But really good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Bill Lorden, who practices in Connecticut. He loves to say there's an ass for every seat.
Okay.
And there's a time and a place for everything and everyone. And there are a lot of chiropractic clinics that will throw out, like, they'll dangle the $17 new patient special
Sure.
or $39 all inclusive.
Well, the walk-ins welcome kind of things on.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I would say sometimes if you're just looking for like a quick, hey, I'm feeling pretty tight, or I need to increase range of motion, or I've got a little muscle spasm, or just looking for that temporary pain relief. Okay. You do that. But I just knew with the specificity of what I do,
Right.
we're just going to charge a fair value-based fee for our services. We're not going to offer any discounts. We're not going to do sales. And I'm not going to bargain with people. I think it's so interesting. I would never go into my dentist's office and be like, oh, well, your fee is $129. Would you take $70 and I'll pay you cash?
Right.
I'm like, no, our fee's our fee. And so I don't know
Are you
if that's...
covered by insurance, some?
we are not in network with any insurance providers with the exception of Medicare.
Okay.
If you're a practicing chiropractor and you're going to see patients over 65, you need to accept Medicare.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I do accept some Medicare patients. Have to be aware of how many because the reimbursement rates are pretty abysmal.
Oh, is that
sadly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sad.
But insurance is a whole different beast. So we are a fee-for-service facility. If our patients do have coverage, we can give them the documentation they need, and they could submit directly. We just take ourselves out of the middle of it. It just keeps it simple for everybody.
Yeah, same thing probably with like even car crashes or different situations like that where insurance might be paying for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just dipped my toe in the water. We had an existing patient that was in a motor vehicle accident. They asked if I would try to bill their med pay through their insurance, and I tried, and I said, listen, I can't. We're two people.
Right.
Like some bigger offices, they have billing departments. They have somebody that's a billing specialist. I just can't do that. But I was just wanting to run my business in a way that was fair, that was lean, and it just made sense. And those aren't the skills that you learn in school. And so I learned a lot from friends and people who were on the path before me that helped me avoid the major pitfalls. But a lot of it's trial by fire and just figuring it out. And also I try to just be a good person, right?
Right.
I think that goes a long way.
Well, and you strike me as the kind of person that's probably, it's hard for you to spend more than you earned, kind of, like, philosophically. Maybe that's not true.
It's interesting what starting a business does to your money mindset.
I'm sure.
Like what I used to think was like a lot of money.
Right.
I don't think it's a lot of money anymore.
Right. My rent is, what I used to pay or have as my gross income. Right.
100%. And so, it's cool. Like, it's cool to expand your mindset in ways like that. And being a business owner, I think, does that in a lot of ways if you let it.
For sure.
But,
What's the investment for a chiropractic degree kind of thing for enough
oh
to be able
gosh,
to
like to get through
pop up your own
school.
shop?
And
Yeah.
so I graduated with about $185,000 in student loan debt. And I
Okay.
will tell you, because of interest rates on student loans, I probably owe like $50,000 more now than when I
Oh,
graduated. And
really?
I've never missed a payment. The system is
Oh,
rigged,
that's so
man.
gross.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And there's I just listened to a really interesting book called A Happy Pocket Full of Money. And it was this whole like money mindset thing, but it was all rooted in quantum physics. It was super interesting and a really quick, easy read if
Wow.
anybody listening
Interesting.
has any interest in any of that.
Yeah.
But it really was about how to change your mindset about money. And it's all just energy, right? If we hold it
suppose.
too
Yeah,
tight,
yeah.
it's not going to flow to us either.
Right.
And so I think that's something that being a
Huh.
business owner has taught me, is that, it's like some people will say you got to
Gotta
spend
hold it a
it,
little
got to
bit
spend it to
loosely.
make it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah, yeah. I've been saying lately, especially since like the European energy crisis stuff and whatever, that energy is more like money than money is like money.
Huh.
Because you can't just print energy.
Right.
Right, you got to dig it out of the ground or collect it from the sun or spin the little blades
Right.
or
It's got to be harvested from somewhere.
it's from somewhere. It's going to take some effort,
Yeah.
which is why gold used to be money.
Right.
Wasn't that easy to find. You had to freaking look hard for it. So
Yeah.
that took energy. Same kind of thing like you're talking about here.
Yeah, it's true.
So a little bit probably on the business lessons. You mentioned three real strong associates so far
Through
along
the
your
years,
journey,
yeah.
only in 10 years almost, or 9
Yeah,
plus years.
exactly.
So that's pretty impressive.
It's awesome, and I wish I could have kept all of them for different reasons.
Right.
And I also acknowledge that like people
They had to
pursue their own
blossom to their
dreams.
next
Yeah,
path and
absolutely.
whatever else. And then you also had an associate doctor.
For a very short period of time.
Okay, and that was at this past year?
Oh gosh, no, I think that was in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was this wasn't an intern? It wasn't.
No,
it was
I
somebody that had been established. in
had
some
hired a
capacity?
fairly new grad,
Okay.
and I like to think of it as my very expensive learning experience.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was difficult. I think as much as you try not to take those things personally, and you just
Yeah.
realize people are going through their own shit,
Yeah.
and that's a reflection of the choices that they make. It was something that I thought about every single day after it happened. It just was very hurtful, and I think I set a place at the
Did you
table.
pay them like a salary kind
Yeah,
of thing?
I did.
And then they had to eat, but they didn't really have an incentive necessarily to build their base. kind of
Well,
thing.
it was, a little more to it than that. I
Little bit
think,
of some
in the beginning, we
incentives,
didn't
so-
really even get through the phase where they were trained enough to be able to see
Deliver the
patients
Brazilian
on their
chiropractic
own.
way kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was pretty short-lived. I learned a lot from that experience, things I will do differently in the
Yeah,
future
yeah.
when I go down that road again. And I'm to the point where I don't think about it every single day.
Right.
So that's a good thing.
Well, it's a nice thing about a chiropractic business is if you can be efficient with your time, you can see a lot of patients in a day.
For sure. I see, an average day is probably about 40 patients.
Wow. Okay.
a lot.
So that's quite efficient already.
It's a lot
yeah.
of peopling for
Yeah,
an
it is.
introvert.
That's exactly. Dang, I didn't really realize the scope of that.
And those are
interaction
established
base.
patients. New patient interactions, of course, we
Sure.
sit down with them
Sure.
for a longer period of
Yeah,
time.
but
But,
otherwise,
if
a
we're
lot of
just in the
times
flow and we're seeing folks that
You're
have
on the
been with us,
path,
yeah,
and
we're
you gotta
just
finish
moving
kicking
and grooving. Yeah, it's
I
good.
dig it. So I feel like probably we could jump in the time machine. Does it make sense to go all the way back, or should we go back to the origin story?
I was born on a Monday.
The question I really wanted to ask was the person that impacted your life in chiropractic also a
She was
upper
not.
cranial person, or how
Upper
did
cervical.
you upper cervical?
That's okay.
How did you get that specialty direction going?
So I was living in Crested Butte
Okay.
and living the lifestyle that comes along with that. I was, probably skiing 100 plus days in the winter and
Okay.
learned how to mountain bike when I lived out there. Like I said, I was a city kid.
What
so
did
I
you do for money?
I worked for the ski area
We
for
had an art
several
degree.
years.
You already mentioned that. So.
Right. So I did a year of AmeriCorps after
Okay.
undergrad because turns out art degree didn't prove to be terribly
Which
useful.
AmeriCorps was super.
That was pretty cool. That's
I'm
how
sure
I
it was
got
super
involved with
fun.
Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah,
So
cool.
anyways.
Oh, great. That's neat.
Yeah.
I volunteered with a AmeriCorps team on a Habitat house some years ago. Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, that's how I ended up on the board of directors here.
Okay,
But
cool.
anyways, moved to Crested Butte through just crazy set of life circumstances, and those were fun years, right? Early to mid 20s, and I was just crashing all the things. I was crashing learning how to ski. I was crashing learning how to ride a bike.
How to date boys.
Yeah, that
No,
too.
okay.
That was
Maybe you had one already. I don't know.
No, in Crested Butte, at least back then, that was 20 years ago. There was the saying the odds are good for women. The odds
For
are
sure.
the odds are good, but the goods are odd. And that was totally true. Although I did end up meeting my future husband at
he's a
Crested
little
Butte,
odd.
and
That's
so
okay,
that's
though.
a huge win. But anyways, because I was just beating myself up all the time, and
Yeah.
literally every time I get back from a bike ride,
you're
I've had
crashing
this
your mountain
raging
bike.
headache, and I'm
Oh.
like, I can't keep going like this, because at some point you realize, like, okay, I'm gonna go on a bike ride, I'm gonna get a headache, I'm gonna pop a couple ibuprofen,
Right.
rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Right.
And I'm
Pretty
like,
soon you're eating 8 ibuprofen a
right,
week.
which is temporarily correcting the issue, but it's
Yeah.
not getting to the cause of why that's happening. And so, my hip was hurting, all kinds of stuff, and I was barely 30 years old, 31 years old maybe.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I should probably do something about this. And a friend of mine in town was like, go see Dr. Mimi. She's a great chiropractor in town. And so I did. And of course, my body started to feel better. And she was a, very traditional adjuster, like adjusted the full spine. And because we were in a very active town, she would, adjust your wrist and your legs and all the things.
Sure.
And I'd feel great when you walked out of there. And I felt really well loved when I walked out of there too. It was very different than any other like doctor experience, right? It was personal and it was friendly, right?
Yeah, more like a massage than a
Yeah,
doctor
and there was
visit,
different connection
kinda.
there, and I also think there was something really appealing to me at that time, even before I knew any of this, that it was working with my body. I wasn't taking anything from the outside and putting
Yep.
it in there. I was just working with the good things that I already had,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, my body started feeling better, but at that time, like I was dealing with some weird like thyroid imbalance, and I redid my blood work, and everything normalized. And I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so the next time I wanted to see Dr. Mimi, I said, hey, this is happening. She's like, Jane, haven't I taught you anything? And it's, a lot of the stuff that you and I were talking
Sure.
about before, that really every organ and tissue in your body is connected to the one under your hat, right? And if those lines of communication aren't open, there's an obstruction there.
Yeah.
Things are not going to work the way they should.
So you're not just feeling like looser, you're feeling just like better.
More connected,
Yeah,
right?
more- yeah.
Things are firing all cylinders. And so it just got me thinking, and I was a 911 dispatcher for the last 4 years I lived over in Gunnison County.
Okay,
That was the
okay.
craziest job I never
Right.
thought
Take
I'd
some
have.
interesting phone calls in that role, I imagine.
Totally. But at that time, she started planting the seed. She's like, you'd be a great chiropractor. And I'm like, okay, thanks. But those seeds took root somehow.
yeah.
And so the school that I ended up going to in Atlanta, they offer what's called a life leadership weekend. So prospective students they'll
Or just come check it out almost.
host these
Extended
weekends where
tour.
they, exactly, like you can connect with doctors in the areas, current students, tour the campus, and just start to understand, like, hey, this is what it would be like. And so I said, well, I'm gonna go. And Wes and I don't even think we had been dating that long, maybe about a year,
Okay.
and maybe a year and a half. I don't remember exactly, but I was like, I'm gonna go out there and do this weekend, and I'll know it's either a yes or a no when I'm done.
Yeah.
And I got there, and I'll probably tell you, within the first couple hours, I was like, fuck. I was
gonna
like,
have to move
I'm
to
going to have to,
Atlanta.
yeah, from literal paradise in
Right.
Crested Butte with
Hot Atlanta.
a guy that
Here we come.
I just kind of started dating and I was
Right.
super into, and we were living together, and I was like, how is this even
Now
going
I
to happen?
have to see if Wes
So that's how it started. But she was not an upper cervical specialist.
Okay.
But I do remember distinctly having a conversation with her before I left for school. And she's like, you're going to go to school. And I had to do 6 months of undergrad prerequisites because I didn't have a science-based undergrad degree.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so she's like, well, take the first 6 months and your course load's going to be lighter. And there's a bunch of different technique clubs on campus where you can, just see like, this is only one way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do this. And she's like, there's chiropractors who adjust by hand. There's chiropractors that use an instrument. There's chiropractors that use a certain types of equipment. And she's like, there's even chiropractors that really just focus on the top bone of the neck. And I remember in that moment looking at her, I'm like, well, that's crazy. Why would they just do that? And here we are.
Yeah.
And because to me, it just made sense.
That's the
By
foundation
doing
of the
this
foundation,
one
kinda.
thing, it can influence every other thing. And it's true. And in fact, some of the original techniques that were upper cervical focused, it was called HIO, and it stood for hole in one. And that has the sort of the double meaning.
Oh, like you just stroke
it's
that
like
one
you're
just right, and you just
getting,
take care of the whole thing.
and the whole thing, because it is a chain that works from the top down.
No shit.
And then
I wonder if
the
there
other
was-
meaning, it's like it's the whole WHOLE in one.
I can't believe I haven't actually talked to you about my straight neck situation properly.
That's okay. And
It's silly.
sometimes I get people that come in and they have lower back pain or sciatic nerve pain, and I'm like, I'm going to look at that, but we're going to search upstream to make sure that some of the roots aren't up or in
Right.
the upper neck. And I can't even tell you, if I had a nickel for every time I adjusted somebody's neck and they're like, oh, my low back feels better. It's like, of course it does.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering to myself. There probably wasn't, because I've met with maybe 3 chiropractors over the years, but none of them had any kind of specialty in that space or whatever.
Yeah, and
so maybe
there's-
it wasn't really a thing. Then,
It's been a thing for a long time, and I think probably a lot of docs don't want to do it because, we get some upper
They get
cervical
pigeonholed and-
coursework in school.
Okay.
But I don't think it's really enough to feel confident going into practice just saying, hey, this is what I focus on.
Yeah, yeah.
So it took a lot of extra time outside of school and conferences,
Sure, and all
seminars,
that
different
time is
technique
time that
organizations.
You're not making money, really, right?
Well,
You're still
even
trying
when
to
you're
pay
a
back the school
student,
loans.
right? And then you have to have a certain kind of mind to want to do what I do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of math. There's a lot of physics. And there's a lot of calculation that goes in. What patients see is the easy part. The adjustment, when it comes time, when that person's on my table and everything's lined up, that adjustment is easy as pie. In fact, sometimes I tell people, especially people who are a little bit nervous or skeptical, I'm like, this is probably going to be the most underwhelming thing you've experienced all day, because
Right.
the adjustment itself is very gentle, because I'm not trying to move things miles. I'm trying to move things literally millimeters, but in the exact right direction. And all of the work that goes in to that moment leading up to the delivery of that adjustment, that's the hard work.
And you still actually use kind of like math, and
Oh,
is it
yeah.
more based on imaging and
Well, it's all image
Got a
based, but then
calculator.
there's a lot of, well, I'm not like literally doing math on paper, but when I learned, like you held little clear things up to x-rays on a light box,
sure, and you're like,
now it's
this
all
is
digital.
this is what a millimeter looks like on a piece of film. Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yep.
Interesting. Let's that kind of is the origin. So let's zoom back to are you good? Potty break or anything like
I'm
that?
good.
Your
Thanks for
water's
asking.
still rocking.
Yeah. I forgot about it.
Let's rock into kindergarten.
This episode is sponsored by LoCo Think Tank. LoCo Think Tank provides peer collaboration for business owners. We build smart, safe places to help business leaders navigate every stage of the business journey, and we love what we do and who we do it with. Our model features give-back-minded business veterans in the role of LoCo facilitators, and we're always looking for abundance-minded individuals to add to our membership, facilitator team, LoCo community, or to feature on this podcast. Listeners of this podcast who go on to become members of LoCo Think Tank get their 6th month of membership for free. Just mention the LoCo Experience podcast on your application. To learn more, visit our website at locothinktank.com. That's LOCO thinktank.com.
You were an East Coast girl. You mentioned before.
Yeah.
AmeriCorps took you
Yeah.
this way.
I was born
kind
and
of.
raised in New York City,
Okay, really?
Yep.
Which part?
in Manhattan. Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Lower East Side, 27th and 2nd.
Okay. And what was the family situation? Siblings, parents, what were they doing?
So my folks, they both worked for
Well, you got a
their
brother
whole careers. I have a younger
who I
brother.
look like, apparently.
Yes, you do, and that's a big compliment.
Would he wear this sweater?
He would wear that sweater. He'd
Perfect,
definitely
yeah.
rock that sweater, Kurt. My parents both worked for the New York City Board of Education in special ed. My mom taught some of the most, some of the most profoundly impacted autistic classrooms. So that was really awesome to see growing up. And my dad ended up still working for the city, but in more of an evaluator role. So he made sure kids were placed in the proper classrooms, that they would be able to receive the services that they needed.
Yeah, yeah. What
But all in
level
the
are they able
special
to
education
attain? And
landscape.
that's really interesting. On the autism side, like I think of autism kind of as something that's really, well, it has blossomed so much more the last 20, 25 years,
For sure.
right? But a place like New York City
Yeah.
would kind of be a canary in the coal mine. They're like, hey, we've got enough of these kids that have this
Oh, yeah.
characteristic because there's just so
So
many
many people. Totally.
Like in North Dakota, there's like 4 kids with autism in first grade.
Right.
Right? It's
I
just
mean,
hard to
like,
even-
you probably grew up in a town as big as my apartment building. Like,
if that, 100,
Yeah.
100 people, I don't think my town's population ever was over 100.
oh, yeah. It's smaller than my apartment building. And so, yeah, my brother is 2.5 years younger than
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
He's, like, amazing.
Did your parents come from there too?
My parents were both born and raised in Brooklyn.
Okay,
Yeah, so they're,
interesting.
like, they're New York to the core.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
You're so much nicer than most New York people I've met.
Thank you.
Colorado softened you up after 20 years or
New
whatever.
Yorkers get a bad rap, man. I think we're pretty friendly.
Well, they don't come here very much, honestly. Like I've met probably 10 upstate New York people for
Okay.
every one city person
Yeah.
that actually moves to Colorado.
I could tell right away when I have a patient in my conference room. Like when I meet somebody for the first time, I'm like, "You're from where I'm from," and I'm like 9 times out of 10, I'm right.
Yeah, no, have you noticed the same? Like when you meet other New York people, most of them are upstate
Yeah,
comparatively
outside the
to
city.
the city. Yeah,
I would say so.
yeah.
I mean, New Yorkers think that's the center of the universe. Most of them don't leave. Like,
Right. It's kind of like North Dakota, except for they think it's that they're miserable people that deserve the punishment they're receiving from God in the form of weather and wind.
oh, very
I mean,
different.
They don't really think of it. Yeah, kind of. That's kind of the culture.
Okay.
Were they like, my ancestors must have been stupid if they moved here?
And
How the hell
stayed
do I get
here.
out of
And
here?
had babies here.
But they're tough
Yes.
and
yes.
relatively innovative and smart. But yeah,
Yeah.
and they make fun of city people anyway.
I know. Well, it's interesting. I married a guy from Mobile, Alabama, and I was so worried to have our parents meet for the first time.
Okay.
I was like, oh my gosh, my parents are like the quintessential, like, Jews from Brooklyn, right?
Right.
They're loud and but my parents, like, they're just the friendliest
Well,
people.
but they're like, no offense intended, but I don't think about special education leaders when I think Jews in Brooklyn. I think either deli or banker or
Well, my maiden name is Goldsmith. And so my family, a lot of them were jewelers, like
Okay,
down the line.
yes, we've
So
got- yeah.
yeah,
So your
But-
your family were escapees from that line of.
yes,
But they were were they middle class in that
very much so.
circumstance?
Like we grew up in rent controlled housing, and
yeah,
I think, of course, they were
they had
probably
stable jobs though.
Yes, very
good
much, and,
benefits, all that kind of stuff. So
exactly.
you didn't have much fear of
No,
the future.
We
or
never wanted
things like
for
that.
anything
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, we had a really, I would say, idyllic childhood in a lot of regards.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as far as having to live in New York City means. Just
Well,
kidding.
it's just so
no,
interesting.
I'm playing, but
You don't know that there's a different world out
No,
there. Like
well,
that's where you grow up, and
were you
that's all
kind
I
of free
knew.
range? Like you could, when you were 8 years old, you could kind of be out in the city, or was
No,
it
I
was
don't-
kind of sketch?
Oh, for sure. New York in like the 80s.
Right.
There was a lot of homelessness, a lot of
Yeah,
drug
okay,
use. Like
gotcha.
the neighborhood I grew up with was pretty marginal at that time.
Okay.
And so I can't remember how. I must have maybe been in 5th or 6th grade when my parents would. There was a little coffee shop in the ground level of the
Oh,
apartment complex
okay.
that I grew up in, and I just remember my best friend Athena, like they would probably hand us a $10 bill and like go out for lunch.
Right.
We'd ride the
And you could
elevator
go to
down.
the coffee shop.
We'd walk outside the lobby into the building next door to the coffee shop, and
Yeah.
of course the days before like
Yeah.
cell phones or anything like
Sure,
that.
sure.
But
I'm just curious of the culture, what it really looks like to grow up, be a young person, a first
yeah,
grader,
I
a
thought
third
it was
grader.
really cool. I mean, the places that we went on class trips are places that like people plan their vacations around visiting.
Right, for sure.
And that was just like our backyard.
Right.
But then the other side of that, it's like I didn't learn how to drive until I was 22 years old. And it was
Oh, wow.
terrifying.
Okay.
And people played sports where they had fields, like stuff like that. It's
Right.
just really different.
Yeah, so talk to me about like what were like because I always think about sports, being whether it's track or
Yeah.
soccer teams or different things like
Yeah.
that. But what do city kids
So I played a lot of basketball.
get into?
Like
Okay, sure.
and that was my
That was your
love when I
game.
was in high school
Okay.
and even getting into college.
All right.
And we played softball too, but it was interesting. Like we had to schlep all of our equipment
Right.
on the
All
subway.
this heavy gear.
Like somebody would carry a bag of bats and the balls and all the catcher's gear and all that stuff. And we would ride the subway to like Central Park or a place that had a public park that had
Sure.
fields. And
So
that's
it's
where
kind
we would
of
play
a
our
chore,
games.
though. You got this gigantic bag full of balls.
Well,
and
I mean, that's
gloves and
all,
stuff,
again,
but-
it's like, that's what we did.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was pretty cool. You ride the subway home and you're like, nobody's going to fuck with me. I got a bag of baseball bats right now.
Right.
Like, it was good.
Yeah, well, plus you're part of a team, probably all riding
Well,
together.
on the way there, but then we all lived different places,
Oh,
so we would
right.
all go our separate
Yeah,
ways on the way home.
interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
we would divvy up the gear and you'd bring it back to school the next day.
And how was your academic pursuits? Were you a smarty pants
Yes,
early?
I was. I just am wired to thrive in that kind of environment. I
Yeah.
loved school. I was always like a great test taker, and
Yeah.
it's not that I always loved learning, because I think as I've gotten older, like when you figure out what you actually love and what you're
Yeah.
passionate about,
I'll learn this. I don't
learning
wanna
that's
learn that.
easier. But
Yeah.
I mean, I always was a really good student,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I just have a brain that takes tests really well.
Well, and cultural pressure too, right? Like between the Japanese and the Jewish, there's a couple of cultures that just have a real.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
they
maybe
out-earn their peers.
stereotypically,
Well,
but
not just stereotypically,
yeah.
in the actual numbers
but in my
too.
family, I guess, like there was never
It never
that
felt like
pressure.
outsized pressure.
No,
No, but just kind of cultural expectation.
for
more.
sure. But I also felt like it gave me the balance of like, hey, I'm gonna perform well in school and I'm not gonna screw this up, so I'm also gonna stay out till like 3 a.m.
What was
and like
like cultural makeup of like the neighbors and the schools and stuff? Was it
Oh,
like
man.
there's like everything like blacks and Puerto
everything,
Ricans and whites
everything. And I think I'm
everything
still
else?
actually really good friends with a lot of people that I went to elementary school with.
Okay.
And we have all commented, like, if everybody's kindergarten class photo looked as diverse as ours, I
Right,
think the
right.
world would be a better
Yeah,
place,
yeah, that's
because you don't learn intolerance for anybody when you
Sure.
grow up in a place like that. You're just kids, and
Right,
you like who
right.
you like. It doesn't matter what flesh suit they're wearing.
Well, and
Like,
I think New York City's probably been known for that for a long time in general.
I would imagine so.
Right, it's been kind of a melting pot.
Totally.
I call Fort Collins a white cheese fondue. Because there's people from all over the country.
Yeah.
They're just all white people from all over the
100%.
country.
I know, that's been a really difficult thing about
Unfortunately,
living
yeah.
in Colorado. Like, I do miss the diversity of, and there's honestly, like, I've had the privilege of traveling a lot of places. There's no place like New York City.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I spent about, 30 hours in New York City on one trip, and that's all so far. So that's probably why I asked.
You
all
gotta
these
go and you gotta hire
questions.
my dad, Phil, to be your tour guide.
So did you, as you're getting ready to be going off, did you go to college directly first?
I did. So I
before
graduated from
AmeriCorps
high
stuff?
school.
Yep.
I went straight to undergrad because
Okay.
that's, I guess, what you did.
And where? What?
I went to school in Binghamton, New York, so about 4 hours away from the city, like
Okay.
sort of western New York, Finger Lakes-ish.
Yep.
It's about an hour
I've
away
looked at it
from
on the map. Yep.
Syracuse, Ithaca.
Which the Finger Lakes are really cool looking on a
Super
geographic
pretty.
map. But, yeah.
Yes, it's. I think that's one of the most
Striking.
beautiful parts of the country.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And the Adirondacks, super pretty. So I you're what, 18, and you go to undergrad, and you're like, oh, I like art. I like making pictures,
Okay.
and so that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But undergrad was awesome. Like again, just.
Like, did you be a graphic designer? Was
Yes,
in
and
mind
so
or
that was
something
like
that?
my focus with my art degree was photography and graphic design.
Okay.
So some of the graphic design skills that I learned, and gosh, when I learned, I mean,
I was looking at your hat. Is your hat yours? Or did you hire
the
somebody to do
logo,
that? Yeah.
that was a joint effort.
Okay, you gave
So-
some feedback to somebody that's
Yeah.
more skilled, fresher.
Well, when I learned, we were literally making things with like T-squares and X-Acto knives. I'm not kidding. That makes me sound really old. We
Right.
were also developing actual film with chemicals and printing them on paper.
Right.
And that's just how the world was when I was an undergrad.
How you're not nearly as old as me, but
I'm very close.
are you really? I'm 50. I turned 50 this summer.
I am 46.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So you experienced a world without cell phones.
Yeah.
At least a little bit, as
Oh, yeah.
you were a teenager.
Rotary phones, all the things.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So
Yeah, I think the world
I,
was.
I put you younger in my mind's eye. I've got you like 42 or
Thank
something like
you.
that. So
I'll take it.
yeah. So yeah, you're right though. None of those skills really applied 10 years
And so,
later.
yeah, technology. I mean, it's almost like that software is planned to become obsolete in a short period of time.
Right.
And so, when it comes to designing stuff like Canva and all that stuff nowadays, like that makes it really easy. And I love doing all that stuff. And I
Right.
do a lot of my own design work
Little
for,
poster, this or that.
yeah, or graphics for my newsletter and all that stuff. I enjoy doing that stuff. And
Yeah, yeah.
I'm very particular about how things look. And, but some stuff I just don't have the time.
Well, sure. Well, it didn't sound like it was really a passion
Yeah, I never
Anyway.
really did it
professionally.
professionally.
Okay.
And so it's not that I don't I don't think I probably would have been good at it, but
Yeah,
it's just not
I
where
got
it's
it.
not where life took
So
me.
you signed right up for AmeriCorps after? Is
So
that
after I
what you did?
graduated from undergrad, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
And I had toyed around with joining the Peace Corps, but there were a lot of requirements
Yeah.
as far as like,
I was curious about that myself, but I was from North Dakota and nobody did stuff like that there.
yeah, and it
But
was a 2-year commitment. And I
yeah,
was
I
like,
remember that part
okay, and I
too.
can't remember exactly all the reasons. I think, I don't know exactly why I chose not to pursue that, but then somebody mentioned, oh, well, they have a version of the Peace Corps that's just the United States and it's AmeriCorps. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And so I applied. Actually, I hope this doesn't get too weird, but like, because I've been reading all these books that have this quantum physics lean to
Okay.
them,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's the first time I actually like manifested something in a way like that I now understand that it has everything to do with how your thoughts actually have a huge part in creating your reality.
Interesting.
But I applied for this AmeriCorps position with Habitat for Humanity, and you had to choose your top 3 geographical locations.
Okay.
And so my first choice was like, I grew up on the East Coast. I was like, I want to experience the West Coast. I want to go to Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
And so that was my number one choice. And I think my second one was like Austin, Texas, Minneapolis. It was, big urban areas. And I got assigned to Portland. I was like, sweet, got my first choice.
Right.
And then we all of the AmeriCorps placements from all across the country, we met in actually Americus, Georgia, where the headquarters is. And we had our big orientation.
Kind of a boot campy thing.
And I can't even tell you. I talked to everybody like, Portland was my first choice. Portland was my first choice. And I had no idea it was that competitive. And I was like, I manifested that shit. It was pretty cool.
Okay.
And so
Do they choose you based on like what they think of your qualifications? Why did the other people get aced out?
I
Did you
don't
get any
know.
data
Like,
on that?
I had interview, like a phone interview, and
Sure.
then,
Must have been school or a ranking system or something.
maybe so. And
or
it
pulled
was,
your name out of the hat. Who
it was a
knows?
team. And so
Yeah.
I think they probably interviewed to make sure that they were trying to put together a team that they thought would get along and have good
Right,
synergy
right.
and all that
Makes
stuff,
sense.
different personality types and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't know, but it was really cool.
They do the same thing with the exchange students. Like
Yeah.
Lenny from
Yeah.
Finland that's
Yeah.
with us now.
That
He's like,
makes sense.
Colorado was my second choice.
That's cool.
Yeah, but
So however I got it, it
Yeah.
was really cool. So
Okay.
I got there, and
Portland's cool, especially in those days.
those days it was
cooler.
really cool. We lived in Northeast Portland, and it just had a lot of flavor, and again, a lot of cultural diversity, which made me feel like right at
Yeah.
home, coming
Yep.
from New York.
Some
And
tall buildings, even not that
in
many, but
downtown.
a couple.
and so I remember getting home from
Nice
that
farmer's
orientation
market.
in Georgia, and we went to the office, and they threw me the keys to the truck, and they were like, back the truck up to the garage and hook up the trailer, and we'll tell you which construction site we're going to go to. And I just looked at them. I was like, I can't do that. They're like, oh, you've never towed a trailer before? We'll show you how to hook it up and it'll be fine. I'm like, no, I don't have a driver's license. They were like, what? And so that was like my first like AmeriCorps job, was to learn how to drive.
Wow.
And they turned me loose in this, I think it was like a 1980s GMC flatbed truck. And they took me out to the Portland Speedway with this huge open parking lot, big clunker of a stick shift. They're like, figure it out. And they're like, if you could drive this, you could drive anything.
Interesting.
And it was true. And I got pretty comfortable driving around in that big clunker of a truck. And my fellow AmeriCorps member, Jim Taddeo, he drove this old minivan. And he's like, you don't want to drive a stick shift for your road test. He's like, it's just one less thing to think about. You can drive my minivan. I was like, thanks, man. It was great. But he's like, just don't even come close to touching the handle of the passenger seat, because the seat will just flop back flat. And that's where the instructor sits. And I was like, oh my God, I was so nervous the whole time that the instructor was just
He's
going to end
gonna
up like
reach under there.
flopping back. But it worked out
I was
fine.
just telling Lenny a story last night that's very relatable. I was bragging to the people that we were taking driver's ed with. So we got our driver's license at 14 in North Dakota.
That's amazing.
And at the time-
terrifying also.
And it was just like barely before I was going to turn 14, but I was still able to take the class.
Yeah.
And we were talking about who was the best driver in the class, and I was like, well, clearly it's me. And my school friends were like, well, you're always like sliding around corners and stuff like that. I was like, well, yeah, that's why I'm the best driver. And I had already logged probably 5 to 10,000 miles of driving before I went to
Wow.
driver's ed and got my driver's
Right.
license at 14.
Yeah.
So just such a different, and driving trucks full of grain,
Right.
combines and tractors
Yep.
and whatever else needed driving.
That could be
Backing up
any more different.
trailers.
Totally.
Anyway, yeah, a totally different perspective there.
Yeah, but I mean that was cool. 22 years old, I was like, yeah, and I could go to the grocery store by
Would you feel
myself.
comfortable driving the tank?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we have a camper van.
Did I start that and then move it? Okay. Yeah, we got distracted.
I'll
Oh, well.
go-
Yeah, we could actually take a break anyway.
You want to?
Want to talk to? Yeah,
Okay.
I think we should.
Let's do that.
All right.
Hi, this is Clint Jasperson, Managing Partner at Purpose Driven Wealth. We believe financial clarity leads to a life of contentment and purpose. Our mission is to guide clients through the complexities of wealth management, retirement planning, and legacy using a values-driven, stewardship-based approach focused on provision, contentment, and enjoyment. With more than a century of expertise through Thrivent, we offer tailored strategies to help individuals and families achieve their goals and embrace generosity. Whether you're navigating a life or business transition or planning for the future, we're here to partner with you every step of the way. To learn more about Purpose Driven Wealth, call 970-330-7411.
And so we're back. And when we broke, you were giving a driving test with a minivan, and it was successful, I
It
guess.
was, yeah.
You got your driver's license at the fine old age of
22, yeah.
and during the break we were talking that like in your like community in the place that you lived, like 90% of adults didn't really drive.
Oh no,
Hardly
like
ever.
my parents didn't own a car growing up.
Really?
I would venture to say that most of my classmates, their families probably didn't own cars either. I can't imagine how expensive it must have
Did
been.
you ride subways then a lot?
Yeah, we walked to a lot of places.
Yeah.
When it was too far to walk, we would either take the subway, city bus,
Yeah.
we take a cab.
So like when you went on exploring as a family and you went to some of these places or
Oh.
as classes, would you take subways? You didn't really have buses?
Sometimes, yeah, I mean, there were school
Some
buses
buses,
that would
okay,
take us on
all right.
class trips. Like I never rode a school bus to school.
Right.
We would walk. We walked to elementary and junior high, and
Yeah.
when I got to high school, I would either ride the bus or the subway, or I thought it was real cool. I would rollerblade to school.
Yeah. I think that's just so illustrative of the difference. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things I've said a lot is like the United States needs to hold the United States a little more loosely. You know, there's like this kind of movement of, banning the Electoral College, for example. Well, then New York and California would basically tell everybody in North Dakota how to live, and they have no idea like what it is to have their kids driving their farm tractor at 13 years old, because that's what you need to do.
Right. It's just a different world, and
Yeah.
different needs. And my world, there's a saying like structure determines function, right? Like the structure of your spine is going to determine the function of your body. Like it's the same thing. Like
Yeah.
your environment determines what
Right.
you need to
And that
have
kind
the
of
skills to be able to do.
Impulse for a perhaps more collectively supportive society
Yeah.
when you have homeless people in the streets and things like that. Like it's like, no, we should take care of this because that's
Yeah.
our kids' safety.
Right.
And
Totally
in
different.
North Dakota, like they're like, here, ride your bike to your friend's house.
Right, and don't
miles
get your
away.
arm stuck in this piece of farm equipment.
Right, don't fall off the bin when you go up and check and see if the grain is dry.
Right.
You know.
And like we were learning how to jaywalk in traffic, right?
When you're jumping from hay bale pile to hay bale pile, make sure if you do fall, you try not to land on your head.
Yeah. I mean, maybe similar skill sets, just applied in an urban versus a rural
Yeah,
setting.
one is more Frogger, the other one is more Tarzan or kind
Yeah,
of thing.
right.
So you get your driver's license, and now you can finally go off and be part of this team in Portland, or were you already in Portland?
Oh no, some other people would
They
drive
drove
me to the
stuff.
construction
Gotcha,
site.
yep.
But it was cool. It was cool to be able to do that. I mean, just even the little things like I remember the first time I drove myself to the grocery store. I was like, I can buy my groceries by myself. This is crazy.
Did they teach you like how to swing a hammer, how to
Oh,
use
yeah.
a saw, all
Yeah.
those things too, right?
Oh, for sure. So that was really what we were there to do. We were there to basically become assistant site supervisors. And so we learned all those skills. Like we were setting roof trusses, we were hanging drywall, we were framing in windows. Like we
Yeah.
learned it all. And it was a really cool thing to do. And then it also planted the seeds for me to become involved with Habitat here.
Yeah, cool. And so you stayed with AmeriCorps for a while.
A
then.
year. It's a
Okay.
year of service.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what was the circumstance that landed you?
So gosh, when I graduated from undergrad, I was dating a guy. We tried to do the distance thing. We probably shouldn't have stuck with it, but we did. So I moved back. We were living in upstate New York, Saratoga Springs at this time.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went back. We tried to, pick up where we left off or whatever. And, it was definitely a bad idea from the beginning. But
Okay.
actually, for a couple of years, we
to tough it
just
out for a
toughed it
while.
out. And
Okay.
it was pretty, I mean, that was an interesting phase of my life. Like, I landed there. It was wintertime. We're getting into wintertime. So I got a job at a little coffee shop. And
That's Uncommon Grounds.
it worked at
Have we
Uncommon
talked about that
Grounds.
before?
I don't know.
I have one of my when I started dating my wife, I lived with two gals I worked with at the
Yeah.
bank, and one of them had worked at Uncommon Grounds.
Wow.
I've been there.
Small world.
When we were in upstate New York.
I've
one
put cream
time.
cheese on so many bagels in that place.
Yeah, she was always
Yeah.
a big fan of that.
Yeah, it was a good coffee shop.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I learned to love good coffee when I worked there.
Interesting.
And
What a small world.
then I would also work
The one coffee shop in New York that I've been to.
in Saratoga Springs.
it
Yeah, that
happens
was
to
a
be-
really
well, no, in
weird.
all of New York State. I've never been to another coffee shop in
And
New
it's
York.
the one that I worked in. That was a weird town. There was a huge disparity between like the haves and the have-nots in that town.
It's like a
with
Vale kind of situation where there's all
totally
these rich people who are asked
yeah, and like
more
Skidmore
likely.
College and
Right,
lots
right.
of very wealthy college students and
Right.
horse racing
And then the people that make them coffee.
yeah, and the people that like grew their vegetables, which was
Right.
me. So I worked on a small organic farm
Okay.
in those years too in the summer.
Learned even more skills. You're pretty well rounded for a city girl now.
Totally.
Because you can
Super-
drive a bus, you could hammer
can.
nails,
I could grow
hang
arugula.
drywall. Yeah.
And so it actually was through the farm and setting up at our farmers market that I met somebody who would spend his summers farming in upstate New York and he would spend his winters working for the ski area in Crested Butte.
Okay.
And so when my relationship finally came to an end,
Was this a love interest?
no, just a
Just-
friend.
He just
Yep.
happened to have
Yeah.
that lifestyle, and you're like,
Well,
I
he
wanna
said,
go to
"Hey, I can
Crested
get you a
Butte."
job at the ski area in Crested Butte, no problem." He said, "Just come out to Colorado for the winter." I was
Yeah.
like, "Awesome, Doug. That sounds great."
right. The
And so
farm's
I
pretty
was,
slow in the winter anyway. I'm sick of coffee.
well, I needed to get out of that town. I was
Right.
at that point, I had moved out, and I was literally in my friend's walk-in closet.
Mm.
It had a window though, so that was
Well,
good.
it's like a bedroom
But I had
house.
like a blow-up like twin mattress in a walk-in closet. I was like, I need a venue change.
Right.
And so when Doug mentioned that, I was like, awesome. I would love to spend the winter in Colorado. And, I had a job waiting for me when I got there.
Right.
And I used to drive this. It was awesome. I had a 1995 Volkswagen Golf. That car was awesome.
Oh, those are
like
great,
little
yeah.
stick shift, zippy little car.
I had a TDI.
Yeah, I love
Golf
that car.
TDI. About that
And
same
so
age.
the plan was we were going to just pack my car up and we were going to road trip it out together and we'd land in Crested Butte. And about a week before we were supposed to leave, he calls me. He's like, "Jane, I'm not going to Colorado this winter."
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, "What?" I was like, "We're supposed to leave in a week. What the hell?" And he's like, I guess I'm probably still the case, but he really wanted a job on ski patrol.
Okay.
And those positions are probably super competitive in Crested Butte. And he was offered a position at a resort in Vermont. So he's like, "I'm staying on the East Coast this winter."
Oh, dang.
He's like,
My
"Well,
foot in
don't."
the door for ski patrol.
Well, he's
Yeah.
like, "Don't worry, you still have a job waiting for you. Like, you're gonna love it. Godspeed." And I was like, "Okay."
I don't
So
know
I packed all
anybody.
my shit into my Volkswagen Golf and I drove cross country by myself. I stopped in Albuquerque to see some friends who actually also worked at Uncommon Grounds who had moved.
Okay.
And I dish dove in the restaurant that they work out to just make a little bit extra money to make it all the way to Crested Butte. I landed there and I think I got there, and then the very next day I started work. They put me on the lift up to this is like sea
And
level.
were you ski?
I snowboarded a little bit.
Like
I
up in
took
Vermont
I
or
took
upstate New
snowboarding
York or
for
whatever?
PE in upstate New York.
Okay.
I wasn't terribly good at it, but I was like 23 years old.
But you'd ridden on a lift before, at least.
Oh, yeah,
a little
all
bit
of that
and
stuff.
But
And
not at elevation.
oh my gosh, they put me on a lift first thing with a shovel. And they're like, "We're building the ramp to get off the lift." And oh my God, I thought I was going to die. Like 11,000 feet. I was like, "What am I doing here?" But I stayed at a hostel the first couple nights I was in town. And then I met just a bunch of really cool people. We got a condo together up on the mountain. And, we lived pretty classic ski bum life for
Right.
several years. It was awesome. And, ended up working at Camp 4 Coffee in Crested Butte for many years too. And it was a really good, simple life when I look back on it.
And how did the 911 dispatch? You were like, well, I guess I should get a big girl job or
Well,
something.
I mean, that was part of
or-
it. Like year-round jobs in the Gunnison Valley. And again,
Yeah.
I'm speaking like the Gunnison Valley of 15, 20 years ago. It's very
Sure.
different. they were hard to come by, like year-round jobs with benefits. Like
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
used to be a huge off season, like mud season. We'd have mud season in the spring, and
Right.
then we'd have mud season again when
Right.
the fall, and a lot of people were out of work for
Yeah,
a
I
few
imagine
months
that's
out of the
really
year.
interesting, even for the local restaurants and stores.
They would
All of a
close, and
sudden,
that's when those restaurant owners would take a breather, take their
right?
vacation,
Yeah.
and tourism was down, so there wasn't a whole lot of people other than the locals to feed, and so town would shut down. And I mean, those were
I wonder, like,
magical
back in those
times.
days, it would probably, like, if you looked at like monthly receipts and wages paid and stuff,
Yeah.
it's probably got some really crazy
Oh, yeah.
seasonality.
Most definitely. Now
Right.
I don't think anything shuts down.
Probably
There's
not
no
as
off
much.
season
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
But yeah, at that time you had to really plan for that because you probably had no income
Right.
or
Very
very
little.
much reduced
Right,
income.
you got 2 shifts a week instead of 6 at the
Totally.
restaurant, whatever.
Exactly. And so I don't know. And I mean, it wasn't that I necessarily needed a change, but it was just there was a curiosity to that type of work.
Yeah.
And I know I've always thought no matter what we do, we're in service to people, whether I'm serving somebody a coffee or I am answering a phone when somebody's
Building a
having an
house.
emergency or exactly like whatever we do, we are serving somebody, right?
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, well, this is a different, really
very
unique way to
honorable
serve the
serving
community.
way,
And
yeah.
honestly, growing up in New York City, I did not at that time have very positive views of law enforcement. And so
Mm-hmm.
I challenged my own way of thinking and actually made some really great friendships with people
Yeah, yeah.
and learned a lot. You learn about a lot. You learn a lot about humanity. You learn a lot about yourself when
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have to handle other people's shit. So it was a weird job.
Do you, like, if you could open a chiropractic office in Crested Butte today and still have the same lifestyle, discretionary income, would you want to, or are you back, in love with Northern Colorado now that you're here?
Man, that's a hard question. I mean, I miss the mountains.
Yeah.
I miss living in a mountain town. But I don't think I could thrive and do what I do, like the specific type of chiropractic
For sure.
that I do in a town that's small, in a community
Yeah,
that's small.
yeah.
And it's also like, it's still a very much tourist driven economy there. And I'm sure the chiropractors, maybe there's more than one. I'm not sure. I haven't been back in a while.
Right.
But I'm sure they get a lot of walk-in traffic from skiers who just need a one-off adjustment.
Sure.
And there's for sure a place for that in town, but that's
not
that's
really
not
the
what lights me
work
up.
that you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
But yeah, I would happily live there again.
Would you, let's talk about like a possible next chapter? Like, do you want to do this for 20 more years and then retire? Now that you've got kind of your business kind of rocking, or do you have curiosities? Would you?
Honestly, this is weird to say. I can't see myself doing anything different at this
Yeah.
point. There's
well, you're
nothing.
46 already, so actually 15 more years you can retire. Or something.
Totally. But I love what I do, and I feel like I have the skill to be able to do it, and I have the ability to communicate its importance to people, and it feels really good
Yeah.
to offer a solution for people that they're not finding anyplace else.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't ever see myself retiring necessarily in a traditional sense. It's like, maybe one day I would hope to bring on an intern who would become an associate who can then basically purchase my practice and take it over and
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
that legacy going.
Maybe leave and let you work 2 days a week there.
Exactly. And just come in and just do the part that I love, which is actual caring for people part. And I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about like writing the checks or, dusting the light fixtures or anything like that.
Yeah, I dig it.
Yeah.
What would you say to a young medical person are the most, whether it be nutrition or chiropractic or whatever, acupuncture
Yeah,
or any
some
of those,
healthcare realm,
some
yeah.
healthcare realm, like what are the most important? Because a lot of them are serve people first and they don't really think about the business elements.
Yeah.
What I guess what would be your advice to somebody in that mindset of making a sustainable machine out of this,
Sure.
if you will?
I think there's probably huge benefit in associating with somebody first. I didn't do that right out of school. Like, I think I had a unique set of circumstances. I was a bit older and I knew specifically the type of practice that I wanted to have. And we knew we were moving to Fort Collins. There was nobody else here doing what I needed to do. So it was on me to basically purchase all the equipment and do all that anyways. So I'm like, well, if I'm doing this, I'm just
We'll
going
do it
for
right,
it.
yeah.
But I think there could have been a lot for me to learn being in practice with somebody else, being under somebody
So
else's
especially
roof.
if you were 23 coming
Oh
out of
my
chiropractic school
goodness
or something
gracious,
like that,
yes.
you would have worked for somebody for 3 or 5 years first.
I think there's immense value in that, or at least having mentors that you hold close that can guide you through startup. Because I'm going to say, like, I probably in most schools that train you to be a massage therapist, nutritionist, acupuncturist, chiropractor, you might have a business class or two, but you do
Right.
not get a business education.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not what school's designed for.
Sure.
And that's a whole other conversation, but you don't graduate with those skills. And you don't even graduate with the skills you need to like understand how to go to a networking function and connect with people. And
Yeah.
if that doesn't come naturally to you, it's a really awkward thing, right?
Right.
And so for somebody young that's looking to do that, like either gain experience and make those mistakes when you have somebody by your side who can help you through them,
Yeah.
or at least have those mentors close that can guide you through it. Like, I mean, I think that's what LoCo Think Tank is for me now and has been for 5 years, is those peers that can
Yeah.
provide input. And
It's been neat to see so many of you grow
it's
so nicely
awesome.
over the last
Yeah,
several years.
that's my
there, too.
crew.
Yeah. One of the things that you didn't say, but I was thinking at the time, is for a young person to really go to a practice that you admire.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
always going to be practices out there and doctors out there. You kind of got to dig a little bit, figure out
For sure.
who you want to be a part
Yeah.
of their team, and
And it's been cool. I've had through the many years students reach out to me and ask if they can come shadow like chiropractic students. And it's
Yeah.
always an honor when somebody reaches out to
I'm
ask
sure.
that. And, I guess to some extent, like that there's got to be this almost like Wizard of Oz thing too. It's like, there's no secrets behind my curtain. There's no magic or,
Right.
mystery to it. It's just grinding it out every day. And not grind
Just
in
doing
a,
the
in a
work.
negative way, but it's,
Yeah.
it's not all glamorous work. It's not all
I mean,
happy results.
If you're meeting 40 people in a day, that's a lot of interactions. even
And
if
it's
they're
also a
10
lot of
minutes,
people
20
who
minutes each.
maybe because they're not feeling their best are in a grouchy mood because they're in pain.
Right,
And,
right,
you know,
right.
it's not always like rainbows and butterflies. And a lot of times it is. And the days go by, but then there's heaviness to it. And also, we've talked about this a little bit about like being in business is the opportunity to you hold a mirror up and it's a lot of reflection of
Yeah,
like who
yeah.
you are. And at the end of the day, it's 9 good things can happen, but 1 bad thing happens. And how do I come
You're
home
like,
and
"Oh,
not
you dumbass."
just
Yeah.
focus on that one negative
yeah,
thing?
yeah,
How do
yeah.
I celebrate the wins too?
Well, I suspect that for your crew at your local think tank chapter, that's part of it. Like they help you look back at
Oh,
the
for sure.
accomplishments instead of just that one little zit you got growing on the
Yeah.
side of your business.
And we
there.
all need that. Otherwise, I think that's a recipe for burnout if
Right.
we don't have that, bird's eye view or that perspective.
You mentioned the attempting to hire an associate doctor there, and it was an
Yeah.
expensive lesson or whatever.
Yeah.
20 grand.
I
Maybe not quite that
intentionally didn't do the math because I just didn't want to know.
Right.
But I'll just say lawyers aren't cheap.
Right. Well, and I suspect that having people that help you get to a mindset of we're just going to move past it.
Yes.
Don't even really need to know the math.
I know. And I mean, even now, about a year and a half later, I don't know that I'm yet at a place of gratitude for the experience.
Right.
I think that's going to require a little bit more self-reflection, but I am grateful for, even the people that I met along the way and the opportunity to understand the system, so to speak, and what happens when an employee decides to file a frivolous complaint. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And
And that is such a thing anymore.
yeah,
Like, I never heard about it when I was in banking, of employees that would just kind of if they got terminated and they weren't happy about it, they just try to make it somebody else's problem.
yeah, and that happened. And on my good days, I just realized that only somebody who's in a pretty dark place
Yeah.
makes decisions like that.
Yeah.
And in those moments, I can have compassion for the situation,
Yeah.
but on my less good moments, I'm like, who does that?
Yeah.
Who does that? But it's a suffering person who does that.
Yeah. Well, hurt people.
That's right.
And that's
And it, honestly, the system is set up so that somebody who just is disgruntled or had a bad experience or just has a bone to pick, they could literally just fill out a form online and just
yeah.
click submit and it goes to the state. And then the onus is on the business owner to fight that.
Yeah.
And, I interviewed a couple lawyers when this all happened. And the first one was like, well, you'll probably spend less time, less energy, less money not fighting this. Just settle.
Yeah.
And I was like,
But that's wrong.
oh, it just felt dirty
Yeah.
to me because what this person was doing was calling my character into question
Right.
with the statement that they provided. I was like, I know in my heart and in all the documentation that I have that none of this is true.
Right.
And I interviewed another lawyer who is the one I ended up working with, and he's like, and I'll tell you right out of the gate, this is a very employee-friendly system. But, looking at all the documentation you have, like, there's no question. And so he said, if you want to go through this process, I can't guarantee you an outcome, but it will probably be favorable for you. And it's going to probably take months. And it did, from start to finish, the whole process, going through like interviews with investigators from the state. Wow. Took about 7 months. And at the end of the day, they, on everything that I was, accused of doing, basically, none of it held any water.
Yeah.
And, it felt really good. Like, actually was in our cohorts meeting, I was with, we were just getting to Avery.
Okay. And
I was with Moses. We were waiting in line, and my cell phone rings, and it was my lawyer. I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be the decision, because we've been waiting. And in that moment, I just wanted to run outside and like Incredible Hulk my shirt off, because it was just months
vindicated
of that anguish, that mental anguish. But then after that, I'm like, man, this doesn't much feel like winning.
Right.
Like, it just feels like a waste.
Yeah, I had 40 hours at least spent screwing around with this whole deal.
And all the money and the time aside, it was like the heartache that I put myself through. Yeah. That sucked.
Well, may you never have that kind of experience again.
I've talked to a lot of friends and colleagues. They're like, man, you sure got the worst experience out of the way first. I was like, great.
Usually people get a little bit richer first before people target them for that kind of stuff.
It's okay.
You know, they have a little bit more, like when somebody's got 20 or 30 employees or something, they're like, oh, he can afford it. I can just get the, whatever unemployment that I don't really deserve, or this or that.
And I just think the whole situation too is a really interesting reflection of folks who went through, I would say, school, particularly school that requires a lot of hands-on interaction with people, who went through school during the pandemic. And they didn't have to show up for class.
Right.
They just did class online, or they did it when they felt like it and submitted the work. But when you're in a profession like mine, you can't just decide to show up when you feel like it. You show up whether you're, feeling 100%. You show up whether there's a foot of snow on the ground. You show up for people, because that's what your job is. And our patients deserve us at 100%. And in my mind, like when I walk through the door, I wear scrubs in the office. Like, it just makes it easy. I don't have to think about what I'm wearing in the morning. It's there embroidered with my name and my logo.
Like a doctor that way.
And it's comfortable. It's like wearing jammies to work every day. It's really comfortable. But when I put those pants and that top on, it's go time. And it puts me in the mindset, like, I am in a work mindset.
Even if you had a fight with Wes on your way to work,
yeah,
whatever. I'm Dr. Jane now.
Correct. In fact, like, Wes jokes around. He's like, "Oh, you got your doctor costume on," but it's true. Like, there's something about it. And then when I take it off and I'm home, I try to leave that at work. And it's just interesting. Like, I hope that there's a younger generation of chiropractors and other healthcare professionals coming out of school that do have that drive and do have that passion to show up for people, because that's not what I was shown.
Well, people need it.
Yeah,
clients deserve it. They're paying good money. I feel like we've covered a lot of the journey.
Yeah.
We always talk about faith, family, and politics as our mandatory segments.
Yikes.
Yeah. Where would you like to start there?
And we can go in order, I guess.
So yeah, are you? My friend says, "Are you Jewish or Jewish? Are you kosher? Do you do synagogue stuff at all?
No. I mean, growing up, I think, we observed the big holidays. Like, my mom's parents were more conservative. Like, I think they kept a kosher house. Like, they had different sets of dishes. And, man, my grandma made good chicken soup.
You had matzo balls and different things like
Yeah, and, like,
that,
we celebrated all the holidays with our families. And
which, when is Hanukkah?
We just had actually this.
Christmas?
Well, it's different because the Jewish calendar is different. But this year, the first day of Hanukkah actually fell on Christmas Day.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And so this year, Hanukkah came really late. Yeah. Usually it's a little bit earlier.
It's the 12th or 15th or
and so we celebrated Hanukkah growing up, and we lit the menorah and said our prayers. Like, my brother and I did go to Hebrew school for many years. I joke around, I'm like, I was a Hebrew school dropout.
Do you have any Hebrew skills? Like,
not really.
And stuff?
Not really.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I could sort of like pronounce text if I was looking at it, but I don't know what the words mean. But all the different songs and the prayers that we used to say in like religious school, like if I ever do go to temple for high holidays, like a lot of it like just sounds really familiar because it's what I remember from my childhood. But we did go on a really incredible trip to Israel as a family when I was in high school.
Oh, fun!
And so that was amazing.
I was listening just this morning. Actually, there's a a Canadian Christian apologist on Joe Rogan.
Oh.
I think Rogan's slowly turning into a Christian. Like over the last 5 years, he's gotten more and more less dismissive, we'll say.
Okay.
But anyway, this Canadian guy apparently tore up this dude in some kind of a podcast debate, and it went viral. And this dude was like sending cease and desist because he sounded like such a dumbass when debating this other fellow. Anyway, he was talking about how, like, at the time that the Jewish
Faith.
the monotheism kind of entered the world conversation, if you will. Like, there was the Greeks and the Romans, and there was like, yeah, your Zeus is kind of like my Poseidon, and Athena is this, and these gods live here and there.
Okay.
And then the Jews come along, and they're like, well, no, actually, there's one God, and he created the whole works, and if your gods are anything, they're demons. And just kind of the, I guess, in a lot of ways, the leadership of the Jews in terms of that whole, the monotheism element, I guess. And so are you a religious Jew? Do you believe in a creator being?
I do, and
Yeah.
I don't know that it's the Jewish version of that.
Right.
But I do think that there's
Something
something
spun this thing up.
greater out
Yeah,
there, and
yeah.
I don't necessarily have a particular label for it.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, do you think of it as Yahweh or whatever in your mind's eye? It's not that God that's described in some of your
No, not
parents' texts
necessarily.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just
Yeah, it's
curious.
good. And like I am the worst. Like I don't. It's like you probably heard a lot growing up Jewish in New York is like a very cultural thing, right?
I would imagine.
And a lot of it has to do with like eating good food and just being with family and
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a big cultural and
Yes.
religious. There's two different things, kind of. There's cultural Jews and religious Jews
For sure.
in some respects, and
yes,
probably just like Christianity and especially Christianity, like in Europe. My grandparents were more religious, and now
yeah,
we're not as much.
we're different, right? It's just we
right.
observe our faith differently.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Anything else on the faith topic that you would want to
Not
share?
really. I think it's just good to be.
You seem like you'd be like a coexist bumper sticker person, at least in spirit, if not in
I would
act-
never
not
put
in
that.
practice.
Yeah, correct. But I agree, and I honestly think that across most faiths and religions, we have a lot more in common than we have that's
Sure,
different,
agreed. Yeah.
right? And at the bottom of it all, like it's the golden rule, right? Do unto others, and
Yeah, I kind of describe it as a same force described by different kind of writers or whatever. Even the manifesting element,
Yeah.
like some people call that prayer.
Sure.
like it's kind of the
100%,
same.
yeah.
Can my intentional communication with the universe or with God or
Yeah.
with whatever, can that sometimes make a difference in what happens?
yeah. And I think we all should look to people with other opinions and faiths and differences with curiosity and respect, and just freaking love each other.
Yeah. That's a coexist bumper sticker, except for
Yeah.
you don't have to have it.
It offends the graphic designer in me.
That's fair. Family. Let's. We talked a little bit
Little
about
bit, yeah.
family, but let's talk. Maybe before we talk about your husband, let's talk about your mom, your dad, your brother, just a little bit more. Maybe your grandparents, if there's really impactful things, or the smartest uncle ever.
Oh man, I think. Have you ever watched Seinfeld?
Yeah, sure.
So like that was definitely my dad's grandparents.
Okay.
That whole dynamic.
Like which one? Like Kramer or
No,
like Jerry or
my grandmother was definitely Estelle Costanza.
yeah.
George.
I got it.
sure.
And the dad too.
So
I
that was
remember
just
him now.
madness. My dad's parents had a little apartment in actually right on Coney Island, and so it was
Okay.
really cool to go visit them. And
Yeah.
we go to like the dirty beach on Brighton Beach and like fill buckets with sand crabs and ride the
Yeah,
roller
yeah.
coasters in Coney Island, and so that was cool. And my mom's parents, they were immigrants from Poland.
Oh wow. Okay.
And they were a lot more traditional, and
Yeah.
they passed when I was pretty young, so I don't have a ton of
They were like immigrants from Poland, like to escape Auschwitz stuff and whatnot. Like
yeah.
that kind of
I
thing.
think they both immigrated to the United States through the UK.
Oh wow.
And I
Wow.
think they narrowly escaped being persecuted in the Holocaust because
Sure.
they looked Aryan. Like they
Right.
were blonde hair, blue eyed people. And,
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, and that's part of they were Polish Jews, but
Yeah.
not necessarily ethnic, or they weren't. They were more Aryan looking,
correct.
as you are, I
Yeah.
suppose, is fair because you're big too, for what I consider like the child of little Jewish people in New York or whatever. I mean, you're not big, but you're fairly tall. You're 5'8" or something.
Yeah.
You're fairly physically strong. Like, you might
Yes.
beat me up if I keep talking about how big you are.
I'm a lover man, not a fighter.
but I mean, you're not.
I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Anyway,
Great.
so where were we at? We were
We were
gonna
talking
talk
about my grandparents.
Yes. Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, so that was the deeper family history is at least on that side. The other
Yeah.
ones were in New York for a long time,
Right.
kind of thing.
And yeah, my parents are both born and bred in Brooklyn, and yeah, they were both in public school education. They retired, and they had like we were a family of four. We grew up in an apartment of I would probably say like about 1,000 square feet,
Oh, wow,
which was
okay.
pretty big. By
Did you have a separate bedroom from your brother?
I did, but
Okay.
honestly, growing up, like we were besties, my brother and I,
Yeah.
and so he had a bunk bed, so I always slept in his bedroom when we were little. But obviously, when I got older and
Right.
became a teenager, I
Well,
was
that was
like, I'm not
inappropriate,
sleeping with
yeah.
my little brother. I was just too cool for
But
that.
just close.
Yeah, and we still are. We've
where's
always
he
been
at?
super tight. He married a wonderful woman who is from Muskegon, Michigan, and that's where they live with
Okay.
my niece Carmen.
Muskegon.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's about an hour from Grand Rapids
okay. Yeah.
on the lake.
The nice part of
It's
Michigan.
pretty.
Yeah.
It is pretty.
I dig it.
Yeah.
What would you say your favorite quality about your brother is?
Oh, he's got a big heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a big, kind
He
heart.
might say the same thing about you.
I don't know.
Can't put words in his mouth. Where did you meet Wes?
Wes and I met in Crested Butte.
And how long before you first met before you kissed him?
Oh, Wes and I, we knew each other for
Okay.
a while before we even thought to maybe become interested in
Oh,
each
is that
other.
right? Okay.
It's a small town. You pretty
Right.
much know,
You know who all
everybody.
Was that the odds are good, but the goods are
The odds
odd?
are good, but the goods are odd. That's right. And I mean, I was not looking for a relationship when I started hanging out with Wes at
Okay.
all. I was actually living, about 7 miles outside of town on this little, in a yurt, like
Okay.
off the grid. I was
Oh,
like, I
wow.
want to be as isolated as possible.
Wow. Had you had your heart broken or something, or what
I
was
just
your premise?
wanted
that?
to be with myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, when I started working at Dispatch, Wes at that time was working for the Crested Butte Marshal's office.
Yeah.
And so we communicated with each other just because we had to professionally. And then we had a mutual friend who had shoulder surgery.
Okay.
And I picked him up from the hospital and got him home. And I was like, hey, man, let me stock your fridge so that you're set up.
Yeah.
And so I went to the store and I was like, I'm going to come home and cook you dinner before I head home. And so went to the store, got back to his place, and he's like, Wes is downstairs winterizing his motorcycle because Wes would keep his motorcycle in Lars's garage for the winter.
Nice.
And he said, see if he wants to come up for dinner. And I knew Wes. And so
Yeah.
I was like, hey, Wes, I'm upstairs cooking Lars dinner. Like, he just got in from surgery.
Yeah.
I said, why don't you come up for dinner? I was making breakfast for dinner. And I freaking hate those tubes of biscuits that explode.
Yep.
Scary.
Yeah. The pop.
Yes.
Worse than a champagne.
I know. And so Wes was just talking about like, hey, I really hope to, ride to Baja and eat fish tacos on the beach. And I was like, who is this guy? And like in that moment, I was like, I think
You're interested.
yes.
You got a motorcycle too.
I know. It was like, I just had no idea. And so that's, we had made plans to hang out. It didn't really happen. I was living down in Gunnison at that time because that's where Dispatch was. So about 30 miles down valley from
Right,
Crested
right.
Butte. But I was going to be spending New Year's Eve up in Crested Butte that year. And I said, hey, man, I'm going to be up in Crested Butte for the night. And a bunch of us are planning on going out for dinner. Why don't you join us? And he did. And we had dinner. We went out. The Brick Oven was a pizza place there.
Yeah.
It's no longer
I've been there
open.
before.
I
Yeah.
know. It's like just all these cool memories. But we went over to the Brick where we both worked, actually. Like, I was a delivery driver, so was he. He worked at the kitchen. I worked at the counter. And I said, hey, I'm going to go grab us a drink. What do you want? He's like, oh, just get me whatever you're having. So I got an IPA and a shot of Maker's Mark.
Okay. For each
And
of you.
for each of us.
I like it.
And it turns out that Wes is an IPA drinker and he loves Maker's Mark.
Perfect.
And I did not want to drive home that night
Which is
because I
probably
had been
wise, 'cause you
drinking
started-
and everybody else had got home. And I was like, shit. I was like, hey,
Taxi service isn't that
Oh,
robust
no.
back then.
in Crested Butte?
Uber
No.
didn't exist yet.
No. And so I was like, hey, can I stay at your place? But I was very clear. I was like, I am sleeping on your couch. Like,
Right.
I am not doing this tonight. And so I did. Like, we went and we sat on his futon. We watched Grosse Point Blank. Great movie. And
I watched Point Blank.
Oh, Grosse
Point
Point-
Break.
different.
that-
Gotta
right,
watch
so-
Grosse Point Blank. It's a good
Okay,
movie.
All right.
Old school.
All right. All right.
I'm surprised you haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I think it's tickling a memory bell. But
Yeah.
I haven't seen it for
It's
sure.
your homework.
Yeah. Okay.
And I slept on the futon, and that's it. We started spending more time with one another,
Yeah.
and it had I don't know, maybe a few weeks, a month. Like
Yeah.
I was living out of town. He came over I cooked dinner one night, and it turns out I found out I cooked all the things he hates.
Oh no.
I was like, I didn't know. I was like, I'm gonna make us nice dinner, and it's like all the things he didn't want to eat, like salmon fillet and like mashed potatoes, and with all this garlic in it. It's like all this stuff that he didn't want to eat, and he left after dinner that night, and nothing happened, and
Not even a kissy yet.
not yet.
Okay.
And he left, and I think it was winter, and he left his gloves,
Oh,
and
okay.
he was outside trying to probably scrape his windshield, and realized, oh, my gloves are inside, so he came in for his gloves, and that was our first kiss.
Okay.
Yeah, like kind of in the doorway.
Yeah, so that was weeks after the
Probably.
kind of romance
I
kind of
think
started.
so.
Yeah, that's very.
I was like, I'm not doing
old-fashioned of
this the same way.
you. Right.
That's always yielded the same outcome, which was an ended relationship, right? I was like, we're gonna do something different.
And how
it was
long?
good.
How long before you guys made it official? Or you are married? Yeah.
Oh yeah, we
Okay.
got married actually when I was in chiropractic school. So we dated
Okay.
for about 5 years before we
Oh, wow.
got married.
Okay.
Like we talked about before, I dragged him out of Paradise to move to Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah.
so I could go to school. But his family, he grew up in Mobile, Alabama, so it was
Oh,
actually
right.
really nice to be close to his family
Yeah,
for the 4 years we were down there. So we saw them a lot more because it was a pretty easy drive.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah,
He's
we
like, why wouldn't I marry this girl that's going to come out of college with $185,000?
Right?
That?
Yeah, it's good.
Is it? Was it 4 years of chiropractic? 2 years?
4.
Four.
Yeah, well, it's a
Okay.
3.5 year program if you go straight through, but then I had those 6 months
Yeah,
of
yeah.
undergrad work too.
Okay, so it's 50 grand a year ish, or at least was
Yeah.
ish at that time with all everything.
For sure.
Dang.
And Wes and I had never talked about marriage ever. And so when he proposed, I was completely shocked.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Really?
No idea.
Like you never thought about it? Like you were 5 years?
I mean, we were
You didn't
happy,
tease
and he
him
was my
about it?
person, and we had the cats. No, like, I mean, if you haven't noticed, I'm not the most traditional person.
No.
And so I never felt at that time, I was like, I don't need this certificate just
Yeah,
to
fair.
like give me confidence in my relationship.
Yeah.
And could you even imagine me wearing a traditional wedding dress, Kurt?
No.
No.
Definitely not. I've seen you at different. You've won awards where I've been the MC. Actually,
Yes, you
before.
have. I think that's how we first met.
Might have been.
But yeah, I mean, we did it our own way, and it was really cool.
Yeah. What would be your? Why would you say? You kept coming back to Wes. Was it like you just vibed well?
Yeah,
Was
I mean, now, like, we've been together for 17 years. Like, he really is the yin to my yang.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he's patient, and he's calm. He's not nervous. He's not a worrier. Like, so all of my idiosyncrasies, like, he really
kind of a
balances
balancing
them
force
out
for her.
really well.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
gives me a huge sense of peace. It's really good.
And are you likewise kind of like exciting and stirring things up that would
Yeah,
otherwise
like-
not be for he'd be just a boring dude?
No, I don't think
No.
Wes would ever be boring. Wes,
He was going to have fish tacos on the beach in Mexico.
I know, and he's got just this like sleeper, awesome sense of humor.
Okay.
But yeah, like I'm kind of, I guess the party planner, which is an interesting role for me because I am not like the most extroverted person. Like
Right.
I really recharge my batteries being home, and
Well, you're all
just-
about excellent execution, though. I think.
yeah.
You're-
And so like, if we're gonna be like, if one of us is gonna be booking like a baller vacation, it's gonna be me booking
Fair.
it for us, typically. Yeah.
Did you guys ever consider children?
For
You're
a short
kind
time.
of-
Yeah. Like, and I don't know that it was ever like out of this massive desire to have kids,
Yeah.
but it was maybe more of like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'd be okay not knowing if it could have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, just if it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, great.
Right, right.
And actually, now that I'm 46, I am eternally grateful that I'm not a mom. Like, I love kids. I love my niece. I love
Sure.
caring for kids in my practice. And I just love my life. And I love the simplicity of being able to pick up and go and do what I want when I want to. And parenting, I can't even imagine how difficult it is. The world's a really weird place.
I was like 42 maybe, and Jill was 36 when
Yeah.
her parents were like, hey, if you want to do the IVF thing or something to try to figure it out, we'll
Yeah.
be. I was like, and I'd be 60. I was like, I don't know if
Yeah.
I want that, and we were still
For sure.
pretty
And
broke at the
look at
time
what you
and
guys are
whatever.
doing now. Like you're being, parents to
Yeah,
exchange students.
we
Like
have
there's so
little
many ways
periods of
to
adulting. We could foster a kid or something if we wanted to. We could
100%.
we
So
could even adopt one as long as they're like 14 already.
yeah,
Like,
no
I don't
diapers.
wanna, right?
But man, parenting a teenager?
Yeah, screw that.
No, thank you.
I mean, I got enough of that with these exchange students. Kind of
Yeah,
try to leave them smarter and more grown up than they came.
yeah, we're cat people.
I don't like to hear that. Really, we have a cat as well, but
I know.
We don't call ourselves cat people.
I mean, like we also live in a small condo. It wouldn't be like
Yeah.
ideal for a
Well,
dog.
cats are like kind of they're kind of a low investment critter. Like they're so self-contained. Yeah, they like to be
Yeah.
petted and stuff like that. But if you go away for 10 days and
Oh, we still
the
need somebody to
automatic
come in.
feeder, yeah,
Well-
sure, but they don't need it.
No.
They're self-contained.
Our cats are dog-like. They like being around people.
Okay, that's
They're very
nice.
social.
Yeah. What would you have a one-word description for your two cats, or is it more than one? More than two?
We do. We had litter mates.
Okay, so
Leo and
brother and sister.
Bonkers. Two
Oh,
males.
two brothers. Okay.
And we lost Bonkers last year. It was really hard
Yeah.
to lose our buddy, but it was also hard on Leo, his brother. Like
Yeah,
he'd never been
yeah.
alone his whole life for 15 years.
Oh,
He's
wow.
15 years
Oh
old.
wow.
And he was a sad boy. And so we're like, Wes and I weren't necessarily ready, but we're like, we're going to get our cat a cat.
Yeah.
And so we did. We adopted from Animal Friends Alliance.
Okay.
They're wonderful.
Okay.
And we got a little calico who was a stray, and they thought she was about a year and a half, and she had just had a litter of kittens, and she was like sort of found on the street and taken into a foster home. And we went to meet her, and we just fell in love with her. She was
Yeah.
just the sweetest, skinniest little thing. And we got her
Very
home,
non-threatening.
and for 2 days, yeah, so we thought. She's a lunatic. Her name is Birdie, and she's just she's a wild cat. And she has a 15-year-old brother
Right.
who, Leo's pretty chill, and Bernie just wants to chase him around and
He's like,
fuck with
"Can
his
you just
tail.
leave
and,
me alone
oh,
for
I know.
a while."
So they're not besties, but they coexist. They coexist like the bumper sticker.
Right.
Yeah, they're all right.
Politics. We better try to be efficient with our time here
Yeah,
to get
let's-
you out in time. Where do you politics lie? What's your
I don't
you-
feel like the current political system has a
lot of your
party or
preferences
a individual that reflects
independent
my beliefs.
currently?
Yeah.
How did you didn't take a week off after the Trump election though? It wasn't that serious. That's scary.
I just keep on keeping on. Like there's that, like, you make your voice known, you cast a vote, and that's the cool part about democracy is
Yeah,
you accept
yeah.
the outcome, right? And it's hard because I think there's ideals espoused by the Democratic Party that I'm like, yes. There's ideals espoused by the Republican Party. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a person's a person.
How
And
about Canada? Should we take Canada as our 51st state? Have you been
I
watching
have a
that
lot of really good friends
narrative?
in Canada. I'd love for them to be,
Be a state with us. Yeah, then we
I
could just
know.
go there.
right?
Yeah.
No passport.
Yeah, exactly.
Just drive across the border. I don't know. I try to walk a fine line, politically, and just being like having my head buried in the news. Like I want to be informed. I don't want to be ignorant to what's
Yeah.
happening in the world, but I can't get lost in it either because it's just madness.
Well, and if 65% of Canadians said, yeah, actually, it sounds pretty nice to be a state instead, I think they could just do it, right?
I
don't
have
know.
no idea. That's above my pay grade, I think. I'm good at a lot of things. And actually in my office, there's not a lot of rules. Like, I take what I do really seriously as far as like the doctoring part.
Sure.
But we have a great time. We have a really upbeat environment in my office. We have a great time. Like there's always laughter and
Yeah.
fun. But the one rule I have is we don't talk politics in the office and
Okay.
we don't talk religion in the office.
Oh, interesting.
Because everyone comes from a different place.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't know who's sitting in my lobby or in the chair outside the adjusting room listening to this conversation.
Fair.
And no matter what my beliefs are, it has no bearing on my ability to care for the person in front of me. And I would never want that to be the reason why somebody was put off from getting the care that they need.
Yeah, that's fair. All right.
So that's the one rule
Well,
I have in the office.
for me, I think it's better to talk about things a little bit instead of it being like topics that you can't
For
talk
sure,
about.
in certain venues and
Right.
you know.
Podcasts are probably better Like,
Yeah.
like I hope it was very comfortable talking about
Oh, it's okay.
the faith topic
For sure.
earlier, and just curious about matzo balls and Hanukkah and whatnot else.
It's good food, man.
Yeah,
But not when I have a waiting room full of people. Like,
Right,
that's
fair
not
enough.
the time of the place.
if you got matzo ball breath, you're not coming in my clinic. Anyway, just kidding.
Yeah. It's weird. Like, oh man, social media is just such a weird place.
What do you think about Facebook changing their policy?
I
Did
will
you see
see.
that?
Yeah, did see it. We'll see if that actually holds to be true.
What do you think about it? Like, you think it's good for Facebook?
That there's not fact checkers.
Right. And that they're, more of a community notes model kind of thing. I don't know.
I don't know.
If somebody's the fact checker, they're always corruptible. It
Of
feels
course,
like.
there's always a bias to it.
Yeah.
And no matter what you're looking for, you're gonna find the answer out there. Like, as in, if you think you're right, you can find evidence there that you're right.
Babylon Bee?
Yeah.
they released their top 10 fact check moments of
I haven't seen
2024
that.
to commemorate Facebook's Zuckerberg's. So
Yeah.
the top one was their article was CNN purchases industrial size washing machine to spin the news before publication.
God.
And Facebook threatened them with banning their account because it wasn't obvious that this was satire.
Oh my God.
Anyway, I like
Yeah.
the Babylon Bee. I think it's pretty hilarious.
It's funny. I think all of that's made us incredibly dumber, though. Social media in
Oh,
general.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm a pump and dump kind of guy. I drop my podcasts on it and
I know.
blow it.
I go down the
usually.
rabbit hole sometimes, and
Yeah.
I'm like, who are these people, and why am I looking at their photos?
Right.
I don't know.
Fair. The LoCo experience.
Yes.
Are you prepared to share your LoCo experience? Not your LoCo Think Tank experience.
Oh.
Although you can do a commercial there if you'd like to. But the namesake of the podcast is
Yeah.
the craziest experience of your lifetime that you're willing to share with our listeners.
You had prepared me that you were going to ask this question
did,
in the
yeah.
email, and I, to be honest, haven't given much thought to it.
Well, it's best on the cuff anyway.
I know. We talked a lot about, I've had a really eclectic
Yeah.
life.
Any life-threatening experiences, near deaths, anything like that?
Thank God, no.
Okay.
I took some crazy 911 calls for sure.
Okay. What do you think is the most number of beers you've ever had in one day?
Definitely an undergrad.
I'm just going to keep asking you inappropriate questions.
That's fine.
Until you've come up with a good local
Oh
experience.
gosh, so you're just distracting me from the task at
Right.
hand.
We went to St. Lucia recently.
Yeah.
And we were there for 10 days, and they got these little Piton, 270 milliliter, 4.5% little beers.
Yeah.
That was kind of the island beer. and they're just, you just drink them, especially when you're coming from elevation.
Sure.
And so my estimate was around 150 Pitons in 10 days, 15
I would
a day
die.
for me.
I would die.
No, you wouldn't. Not at sea level.
Maybe.
That's 6 IPAs.
I feel like I got
That's 6 IPAs, seriously.
most of my drinking behind me, seriously, when I was in high school.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah.
So, so you don't have any vices in the drinking days, even when you were ski bumming and stuff like that?
Yeah, we partied for sure,
Okay.
but not heavy, crazy stuff.
Okay.
I don't know. I like to have fun, but I also have this cautious part of me.
You never took a hero's dose of mushrooms or anything like that?
No, not a
You
hero's
know what a
dose.
hero's dose is?
I do.
I've never experienced it personally, but I've had
I don't
some people
know.
describe it to me.
Maybe I'm too much of a control freak to
I think, yeah, probably.
want to let go like that, but maybe it'd be good for me. I don't know.
I don't know. Oh, dude, Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas,
Okay.
was on Rogan advocating for Ibogaine
I don't
to
know
help.
what that is.
That's this kind of terrible, gross drug, but it's getting a lot of the PTSD people and the suicidal things, and getting people off opioids
Oh,
more than anything. So he was on there with this guy from Kentucky that got everything crossed bridges except for then the new administration came in and pulled the plug on doing a study of this Ibogaine drug mostly to get people off the opioids that are
Interesting.
fucking people up all over Appalachia. But it's also fucking people up in Texas and Wisconsin and Nebraska and everywhere
everywhere.
else.
And actually, there's different organizations within chiropractic that do a lot of lobbying. And you know what else helps with pain relief? Chiropractic care.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, as corny as that sounds, it's true. Like, it's a natural way of helping people
Yeah.
deal with pain.
So anyway, it's a really interesting. I guess it's kind of adjacent to the political side, but with this,
Yeah.
like you think about with the Maha element of the MAGA
Sure.
too, right?
I
And,
hope some
like,
of that stuff is true. I hope we
so.
get food additives out of our supply. And,
Totally.
so I hope some of the, I hope these ideas, people are going to put their money where their mouths are. I really
Yeah.
sincerely do.
I agree.
So.
I agree. Did you think of anything crazy? A real crazy experience? Nothing?
Give me like a topic.
I don't know. Gosh, I've literally had like 7 near-death experiences.
Really?
In my
I mean, I don't, I
lifetime.
haven't had like a boring life by any stretch,
Yeah.
but I don't.
Yeah, nothing. So, I mean, anything that really, I guess, to me, like, the one thing that's kind of crazy is, like, you're like, I signed up for this AmeriCorps thing, and they're like, here, drive this truck to this place. And you're like, I mean, but it's like, we kind of covered that, and it's not really crazy.
It's not crazy.
Have you ever done a long road trip to a foreign land where you didn't really know what you were doing? Or
Well, I mean, I
anything
drove
like
to
that?
Crested Butte by myself.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
that
pretty
was
crazy.
that was
a week after the dude said, JK, I'm not going.
Sure. I mean, that was a big leap in my
Yeah,
life for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I think going to chiropractic school was another big leap.
Sure.
It's not crazy though. It's just like
A little crazy.
seeing an opportunity and
I think the move out to Crested Butte from, I mean,
New York
although
City?
the walk-in closet that you were living
Yeah.
in was a pretty big draw, I'm sure, and so
Right.
it was kind of, like you said, time to make a change.
yeah.
But
I mean, that changed the trajectory of my whole life.
right
For sure.
And had you even been
No.
up to the Rockies before?
Sight unseen. I didn't know I was moving to literally a town at the end of a dead end road. 1,100 people.
Right.
I had no idea. And now I think, honestly, having traveled more of the state of Colorado after being, I've been here for a long time, I still think that's the most beautiful place.
One thing that people say, like one thing that's interesting about marriage, you've been 17 years, is that it's like you don't stay married to the same person. Like we all have these
Yeah.
different chapters in our life, and
Yeah.
there's one reason to be married is so that, provided you both want to stay, like you're just patient enough to weather some of these changes in chapters or
For sure.
whatever.
For sure.
So
And I mean, I'm so glad to have somebody to come home to that almost doesn't live in the same world, right? Like that's why we
Totally.
have our entrepreneurial peers, because they get what we were going through, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
nice to come home and be like, let's just watch an episode of bad TV.
do you want to give a shout out to either Moses,
Yeah.
my landlord here, and our your chapter facilitator?
For sure.
He's
So
been over 5 years.
I think we started. I mean, this
Well, I don't
is
know
going to
when you
sound
started,
super weird.
but-
I started in 2019. And the reason I remember that is because that's the year my mom passed away.
Okay.
And I remember having one of my first chapter meetings, and it was literally like, I was probably June of 2019 because my mom passed in May.
Oh wow.
And, we do these check-ins, and they're, on a scale of 0 to 10, how you doing personally? I'm like, like
I'm a
2, like
2.
pretty shitty. But these are people that I just met, and I'm like, I don't know how deep
Feels
of a
good, though,
dive to
doesn't it?
take. And so many of those people who were in that room that day are still in the room. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful. Like, Moses is an incredible facilitator. Like, he's just got all these years of experience, and he's
Yeah.
willing to share it
Doing it
from
for the
his
right reasons.
own abundance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and it's like, I look forward to it. Like, when we first talked, I'm like, oh, I gotta sit in a room for 4 hours.
Right.
But like, I look forward to that every single month. And
Yeah.
like that, I let go of a lot of stuff like during COVID, as far as memberships and groups and all this stuff that I was doing, because, what you get out of something is what
Sure.
you're able to put into it. And I
Right.
realized it was a good time to evaluate a lot of that stuff. And I was like, well, here's what I'm keeping and here's what I'm letting go of. And I'm so grateful, like, for my group. Like, they have become really important people
Yeah.
in my life, and
really
people
cool
who
thing.
understand like the ins and outs of what we go through. So like, I think that's a testament to you and like
Yeah.
what you've created, the
Well-
space that you've created to help us.
It's the space.
Yeah.
But it's the people that create
Totally.
the experience. Every
Yeah.
month.
And I mean, I don't know what other chapters are like, but I like to think we're the best one.
You're right up there. You're right
Yeah.
up there.
You just can't say it.
Well,
we are
Jane,
the best.
if people want to look up Precision
Yeah.
Chiropractic, do you have a precisionchiropractic.org or com or something like
Yes,
that?
well, there's a lot of precision chiropractors, and ironically, I know most of them across the country, right?
Right.
So we're precisionchiroco.com.
Okay.
Yep, CO
Got
for
it.
Colorado.
And do you do like Instagrams or
Yep.
LinkedIn?
So
What's your favorite there?
it's I suck at the social media thing for my business. Like I put stuff up there like we have a platform that automatically solicits reviews from patients. So when people leave us reviews, they automatically post to our social
Perfect.
media. Like I don't mind it. Like I don't take care of it that
Yeah,
much,
yeah.
but we are on Instagram and Facebook at Precision Chiro CO. And I have a personal LinkedIn profile, Jane
Okay.
Brewer, DC.
Cool.
Yep.
Anything you want to ask me before we wrap up? What do you think about the tank?
I think it's really cool.
You've been inside it before,
We've been
right?
inside it,
Yeah, I
yep.
thought so.
When we were at your
We
place.
need to be better about trying to. I would like to do a like at least a maybe 3, 4, 5 rigs camping trip and go
Yeah.
up to some kind of
I would
national forest.
love
Maybe just
that.
up to Vedavu area or
Yeah,
something. It's
for
really
sure.
sweet up there.
Yeah, it's sweet. We can hike. We can ride bikes.
Totally.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's get a weekend.
LoCo van
figured out.
extravaganza.
Yep. Camperoo.
We're in.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Jade. Love
Thanks,
it.
Kurt.
Bye for now.
Bye.